Chapter 573. That day, the smell of blood rushed into the sky. I was terrified on Tile Mountain. The bells in the 17 halls of the Lank Temple sounded an alarm and rang at the same time. The bell rang for 3 days and 3 nights. Master Xiaofan turned around and looked at Ning Quebec. He said, and just a few days ago, the 17 bells in the Lank Temple rang again. The bell rang all the way to Tile Mountain. I then realized that the smell of blood had appeared again. Hearing this, Ning Kei's expression did not change at all, but his body in the Black Academy uniform tightened involuntarily. His mind was in a mess, and then he became very alert. The Buddhist bells in the Lank Temple had rung because of Lotus practice of Tao Tai. So when the bells rang again a few days ago, they must have sensed what he had done to Long Qing in the autumn rain at the Red Lotus Temple. Master Xiaofan had obviously guessed the truth, but he did not expose it. He said kindly, "I am now old and dying. Although I dare not say that I have seen through the difference between the orthodox and the devil, I have at least seen through it. However, there are still many people in this world who cannot see through it, such as the Xiankong Temple and Haotian Taoism. In the eyes of Haotian Taoism, even the Buddhism sect is outside the Taoism, let alone the devil's doctrine. Ning Kei, you have to understand that a man cannot defeat the heavens. No matter how strong Mr. Ku is, he cannot be stronger than the heavens. No matter how high the headmaster of the academy is, he cannot be higher than the heavens. So it is best not to come into contact with some things. If you have already come into contact with it, forget it." Ning Kei knew that the master was being kind and was trying to persuade him not to go deeper into the devil's path. No matter what situation he faced, he should not use the evil and bloody practice of Tao Tai. After the autumn rain, he often felt that there was still a strong and slightly sweet taste of blood in his mouth, as if Long Qing's flesh and blood were still hanging between his teeth. It was extremely disgusting. Because of the psychological trauma since childhood, he believed that he could control himself from using the practice of Tao Tai. However, he could not stop cultivating youngest uncle's great spirit. So would he eventually walk the same path as youngest uncle? Master Xiaofan said, "Tell me about Lotus." Ning Kei lowered his head in silence. Even if the master had guessed the truth, he was still not ready to admit it because he did not want to take any risks. Master Xiaofan sighed and said, "Decades ago, I was the one who brought junior brother Lotus into Buddhism. How could I not feel that he had passed on his mantle to you? I just want to know what happened to him after that." Perhaps it was the disappointment and regret in the master's voice that moved Ning Kei, or perhaps it was because he was very respectful of the relationship between senior and junior brothers. After a moment of hesitation, he began to tell the bizarre story in the depths of the wilderness. That side hall was filled with bones and dried corpses. Master Lotus was sitting in the middle of the pile of bones and corpses. The Lank Temple was quiet in the autumn rain. The incense burning in one of the halls stubbornly penetrated the heavy rain and floated to the corridor of the back hall, turning the oppressive and cold atmosphere into solemnity. After listening to Ning Kei's story, Master Xiaofan was silent for a long time. He smelled the faint fragrance and raised his skinny arm. His fingers trembled as they slid through the air, as if he wanted to grasp something. However, the fragrance was fragrant but formless. It was like a memory that he couldn't grasp. Even in such a hopeless situation, he was still able to make good plans and wanted to use you to escape. That was indeed junior brother Lotus's personality. Even though he died in the end, he was actually able to escape from the confinement of his body. He should be happy. A complicated smile appeared on the master's old face. Ning Kei thought of what he had experienced in the front gate of the devil's doctrine and the fragments of Lotus's consciousness in his sense of perception. He looked at Sang Sang, who was sitting on the futon in the depths of the hall, and said, "Before Lotus died, he once said that if Taoism and devil's doctrine were connected, one could enter divinity. Now Sang Sang has cultivated both Taoism and Buddhism, and her body seems to be born with some kind of divinity. If she continues to cultivate like this, is it possible that she will repeat Lotus's mistake and become a madman? Master Qishan looked at the hall and said calmly, if she wants to turn the black chess piece white, she can do it. Thinking is what we call Buddhism. It has power in itself. If she doesn't want to become Lotus, she won't become Lotus. Then the master turned to look at him and asked, but you, what will you think? Ning Ke thought for a moment and said, I don't know, but it must be relatively simple. The simpler and purer it is, the more powerful it is, and sometimes the scarier it is. Master Qishan looked at him and said gently, why didn't you come into the hall to listen to my preaching with Sang Sang? If you don't like my preaching, there are many Buddhist scriptures hidden in the Lank Temple. You can read them yourself. Buddhism can break the demons in your heart and get rid of all obstacles. It is good for you now. Master Lotus once said that the Buddhist scriptures are as vast as the sea. But if you look carefully at the bottom of the paper, you will find that all the Buddhist Dharma actually talks about one word, tolerance. And second brother once said that there are 3,000 Buddhist Dharma, but it is just a way to teach people to deceive themselves. Ning Ke said, tolerance and self-deception are the same thing. I am very good at tolerance, so I don't need to learn it. As for the method of self-deception, I am worried that if I lie to myself for too long, I will forget my original intention and think that it is all true. I will never wake up. Mr. Second is a courteous person. Naturally, he can't stand the Buddhism sect's disrespectful behavior. Master Qishan asked, but if life is a big dream, why wake up? Ning Ke said, even if we dream, we have to be happy. So even if life is really a big dream, we have to pretend that it is not a dream. Master Qishan asked again, then how do you know that the world in the Buddhist scriptures is a fake dream and not reality? After saying that, Ning Ke remembered that he had boasted to Chen Pipi in the back of the mountain of the academy that even though he was not a scholar, he could occasionally say something shocking. He was a little proud. However, when the master asked again, he found that he did not know how to answer. Only then did he confirm that the shocking words of an uneducated person were indeed something that happened occasionally. He was not qualified to understand the meaning of Zen. He said helplessly, Master, why do you want me to learn Buddhism and Zen? Sang Sang is sick, and she can't get better if she doesn't learn Buddhism. This is her fate with Buddhism. I don't think I have any fate with Buddhism. Master Qishan laughed and said, how can the fate that Buddhism talks about be so simple? It seems that you really haven't read any Buddhist scriptures. I have to help you with this lesson on behalf of the headmaster. Ning Ke felt that something was wrong. Master, you seem to think highly of me, but I really don't think I'm special. He turned to look at Sang Sang in the hall and said, compared to her, sometimes I really feel that I'm as stupid as a pig. No matter how much I cultivate Buddhism, I can't make the Buddhism sect have another master. She is the most special one, and you are also the special one. Master Qishan followed his gaze and looked at Sang Sang, who was already in meditation. He said with admiration, the Lady of Light is pure in body and mind. She can understand the divine skill with a single thought, understand Buddhism with another thought, and know destiny in 3 years. Before the master could finish his words, Ning Ke shook his head repeatedly. I know that there are people who are faster than me, so I don't think I'm special. Master Qishan said, but that kind of person is extremely rare. Ning Ke said, there are still people who are rare, so I'm not special. Master Qishan looked into his eyes and said in confusion, you seem to be very worried about being the special one. Ning Ke said, what do I mean by standing out in the forest? It's really annoying. I don't want to be a fat pig. Master Qishan laughed and said, that's just because you are in the academy. Ning Ke said with a smile, that's right. For example, my eldest brother comprehended the see-through in the morning and entered the knowing destiny state in the evening. Only people like him are qualified to say that they are special. Even if I smack the butt of a black horse, I can't catch up with him. Mr. First is a peerless person who comprehended the Tao in the morning and entered the Tao in the evening. Master Xiaofan said, but you are very different from ordinary cultivators in the world. Except for Master Yen Sei who saw your talent in talisman Taoism, your other talents in cultivation are just ordinary, Ning Ke added, not only ordinary, but also extremely bad. Master Xiaofan said, however, with such terrible talent, you entered the knowing destiny state in 3 years of cultivation. This proves that your ability has exceeded the scope of ordinary talents. I don't know how you cultivate, but I have heard of your performance at the 3 most critical moments in cultivation. When you entered talisman Taoism, you relied on a summer rain. When you entered the see-through, you relied on a fish cooked by the calligraphy addict. And a few days ago, you entered the knowing destiny state in battle without any warning. Master Xiaofan continued, cultivators pay attention to step by step and learn to master the rules of the Qi of heaven and earth. As for the disciples of the Buddhism sect, they rely on years of painstaking cultivation to have a clear understanding. This is the so-called enlightenment. Ning Ke remembered the teachings of Master Huang Yang at the Wanyan Tower Temple. Master Xiaofan looked into his eyes and said seriously, your performance when you broke through the realm had nothing to do with those opportunities. It was more like the enlightenment that the Buddhism sect talked about. Therefore, your comprehension is excellent. It is a pity that you don't learn Buddhism. Ning Ke could not help but feel that second brother's words were indeed reasonable. Whether it was Taoism or Buddhism, when they wanted to absorb new blood, they were really like the guys in the rat society who spat everywhere. I am really afraid that I will fall asleep reading the Buddhist scriptures. He begged for mercy. Master Xiaofan took out an extremely thin scripture from his sleeve and handed it to him. He said, I specially picked an interesting scripture, and it is very short. You won't fall asleep reading it. After saying this, the master walked into the temple to see how much Sang Sang had learned today. Ning Ke opened the book in his hand and saw that it was just some simple illustrations of Buddhist stories. He could not help but feel a little embarrassed and angry. He shouted at the master's back, this is for children. Can I have another one? After lunch and a rest for a while, Sang Sang continued her Buddhist lessons. Ning Ke stood under the porch in front of the temple and teased the big black horse with a snow lotus. He felt bored and finally remembered the scripture. The illustrations in the scripture were simple and smooth, and the stories were also very interesting. They hid the enlightenment deeply and cleverly. The more he read, the more interested he became. He simply asked the monks in the temple to find a bamboo chair. He lay on the chair and casually flipped through the book. Occasionally, he would take a sip of hot tea. When he did not want to read, he would look up at the fine autumn rain in front of the temple and relax his eyes. He felt very comfortable. Master Xiaofan walked out of the temple. Ning Ke stood up from the chair and handed him hot tea. He asked confusedly, Master, why did you come out? Master Xiaofan did not stand on ceremony. He took the hot tea and lay comfortably on the bamboo chair. He said, Miss Sang Sang is meditating again. I have nothing to do inside, so I came out to talk to you. Ning Ke said in surprise, meditating again so soon? Don't tell me this stupid girl is sleeping. Meditating was a term used by the Buddhism sect. It referred to the settling of thoughts before enlightenment and the state of being completely oblivious. In terms of Haotian Taoism cultivation, it was probably the state of emptiness before finding the opportunity. Sang Sang meditated before noon and again in the afternoon. This meant that Master Xiaofan taught her Buddhism Dharma and she could understand it without any effort. No one would believe it. Even though Ning Ke knew that she could produce Haotian divine light on her fingertips in the blink of an eye when she learned West Hill divine skills from Wei Guangming, he still could not believe it. So he suspected that she was asleep. Master Xiaofan said, I can still tell the difference between sleeping and meditating. Ning Ke looked at his calm expression and asked curiously, "Master, you don't seem surprised." Master Qishan took a sip of tea and said with a smile, "I won't be surprised no matter how strange things happen to her." Ning Ke said, "Now I believe what you said last night." "What did I say?" "You said that Sang can become Buddha. Everyone can become Buddha." "Master, I'm really not good at saying these things, even though Zen does sound charming." "Then I'll make it clearer." Master Qishan lay in the chair and tightened his clothes. He said, "Buddha is a human, so why can't humans become Buddha?" Ning Ke said, "I used to think that Buddha was just a symbol like Haotian. Until my teacher mentioned it once, and then I saw the chessboard yesterday, I realized that Buddha really existed." Master Qishan looked up at the sky and said, "Buddha also lived under the sky." Ning Ke looked at the gray sky and asked, "Since it's the world of Haotian, why does Buddha exist? Where did Buddha go in the end?" Master Qishan said, "Since there's a beginning, there's an end. If there's life, there's death. Since Buddha was a human, he passed away in the end. This is something that can be checked in history." Ning Ke thought about his strange experience and thought that death did not necessarily mean that there was life. Thinking of this, he looked at the lingering autumn rain and felt like spring rain. He couldn't help but feel a little tired. He thought that even if they were chatting, they should talk about something meaningful. He leaned against the railing and asked, "If Buddha was also a cultivator, what state did he reach in the end? As a disciple of Buddhism, how can I impugn the power of Buddha? Buddha is merciful. It's not a sin to talk about it." Ning Ke looked at the master and asked tentatively, "Buddha must have surpassed the 5 states, right?" The master smiled and said, "There's no such thing as the 5 states in Buddhism. I mean the approximate level." "Of course." Ning Ke understood. He suddenly thought of a rumor. He looked at Master Qishan and asked seriously, "It said that before you got sick, you were regarded as the most promising person in the cultivation world? There's one more chapter. More to come. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation." Chapter 574. Master Qishan smiled and said, "Hope and reality are 2 different things. Even if you break through, it's not something to be proud of. As you said before, it's hard to think that you're the special one." Ning Ke smiled and said, "You're too arrogant." Master Qishan was slightly stunned and said, "How so?" Ning Ke said, "The 5 states are the gap between heaven and man. If you can break through the 5 states, you'll become a legendary sage. There hasn't been a sage in the cultivation world for many years, but you said it's nothing. Isn't that arrogance?" Master Qishan shook his head and said, "Although it's difficult to break through the 5 states, there are many people in the cultivation world who have the chance. And even if you break through the 5 states, how can you be called a sage?" Ning Ke was puzzled and said, "Why haven't I heard of anyone who can break through the 5 states? Master Qishan looked at him and asked, "What's Mr. Second's current state?" Ning Ke thought for a while and said, "Second brother should be at the peak of knowing destiny state, but, you know his temper. Who knows if he'll break through the void if he's really angry." After saying this, he couldn't help but laugh. Master Qishan didn't laugh because he didn't understand. Ning Ke awkwardly stopped laughing. Master Qishan said, "Since Mr. Second is already at the peak of knowing destiny state, then," after saying this, the master stretched out a finger and pointed to the top of the hall. Ning Ke suddenly realized that since second brother was already at the peak of knowing destiny state, eldest brother was naturally close to breaking through the 5 states, and might even have broken through. As for the teacher, this was a normal human discussion and had nothing to do with him. "Well, I admit that some people can break through the 5 states. Liu Bai once fought with Master Yen Sei, and the East Sea was turbulent. Everyone said that he was most likely to break through the 5 states. In my opinion, he could have broken through the 5 states long ago, but he just didn't take that step. Master Xiaofan said, Junior Brother Lotus was amazing back then. He practiced both Taoism and Buddhism, and had the foundation of the devil's doctrine. If he wanted to, it wouldn't be difficult for him to break through the 5 states, but he didn't want to. Ning Ke had heard this from Lotus himself at the front gate of the devil's doctrine. At that time, he only believed 60% of it because he felt that it sounded like a big shot bragging before he died. Why? Ning Ke was puzzled and asked, why didn't these people choose to take the last step? Breaking through the 5 states means that the cultivator has left the secular world. Not only can he completely grasp the law of the aura of heaven and earth and understand the rules of the world, he can even create new rules. However, this is Haotian's world after all. The rules of the macro world cannot be challenged, so we still have to rely on the rules of the macro world. Master Xiaofan said, so for those few real powerhouses, the biggest difference between the peak of knowing destiny state and breaking through the 5 states is the understanding of the origin of the world. It doesn't increase their strength much. Ning Ke could not understand and said, it's always a good thing to improve. Who can resist such temptation? Master Xiaofan sighed. He glanced at the gray sky again and said, you are right. The temptation is indeed too great. But it is precisely because of the temptation that those people do not dare to take that step. Do you know what realms are above the 5 realms? Heaven opening, limitless. I've only heard of these 2. Ning Ke answered. This was what he heard from Liu Qingchen on the journey from the city of Wei to Chang'an. At that time, he could not cultivate. Now he was a grand cultivator in knowing destiny state, but his understanding of the legendary realms above the 5 states was still at this level. He had once asked in the back of the mountain of the academy, but his senior brothers thought that his question was too boring and ignored it. Now it seemed that he could hear the answer from the master, so he could not help but feel a little excited. In the classics, there are many realms beyond the human world. The heaven opening you mentioned is the one that is recorded the most in the West Hill classics. The limitless is also a great divine power. In addition, there are also the infinity and extinction of Buddhism, the omen realm of the devil's doctrine, the quietness of Haotian Taoism. These realms are all above the 5 states. They have their own wonders, but there is no difference between them. Master Xiaofan paused for a long time at this point. In the legend, there is a more wonderful realm above all the realms. Even the oldest classics do not record it. It is only passed down by word of mouth on the 2nd floor of a temple, a monastery, and a sect. That is, the immortality of the devil's doctrine. The nirvana of Buddhism. The ascension of Haotian Taoism. The transcendence of the academy, the autumn rain pitter-pattered, and it gradually became cold in front of the hall. Master Xiaofan wrapped his cotton-padded coat tighter around his body. The devil's doctrine was founded less than 1,000 years ago, and I have never heard of anyone who cultivated to immortality. When the Buddha passed away, there was a vision in the sky. It should be the nirvana. The ascension of Haotian Taoism is relatively common, and they are the immortals in the folklore. Ning Ke vaguely understood something. Master Xiaofan said with emotion, in tens of thousands of years, there may be one person who can reach the end of the long road of cultivation. One person can reach the other shore, and one person can be immortal. At that time, they will return to the embrace of Haotian. Ning Ke looked at the stone steps wet by the rain and asked in a daze, death or immortality? No one knows. Master Xiaofan was slightly perplexed and said, the Buddha will not tell us, and neither will the seniors of Haotian Taoism who have ascended to immortality. So this is the biggest temptation and also the biggest fear. Ning Ke looked up at the master and asked, so neither Liu Bai nor Liansheng dared to take that step? Master Xiaofan said, that should be the case. Breaking through the 5 states is still a long way from those supreme states. However, as the saying goes, one can only know the taste after tasting the marrow. After a cultivator understands the feeling of creating rules by himself, it is difficult to control the desire to continue to pursue upward. So unless one is sure that one's talent is just enough to cross that threshold, no one dares to take that step. The master slowly shook his head and said, however, those who can break through the 5 states must be great figures like Liu Bai or junior brother Lian Sheng. They are very confident in their talent. Ning Kai suddenly said, headmaster of the academy. Master Qishan said, don't ask me. Decades ago, the headmaster of the academy said that he was not a saint. If you want me to guess, I guess he cultivated the state of pureness. Ning Kai smiled and said, he is so lively. How is he quiet? Master Qishan said, it is enough to have peace in the heart. Ning Kai reached out to collect some rainwater outside the hall and rubbed it with his fingers. After a long time, he asked, is there no one who cannot ascend to heaven? Master Qishan said, who can escape the cycle of heaven? Ning Kai slowly withdrew his hand and wiped it on his academy uniform. He said, teacher did not tell me this. Master Qishan said, because the headmaster of the academy is sure that you will definitely reach the peak of knowing destiny state in the future and see the gap between heaven and man. Then, you will naturally know the temptation and fear in the human world. Above the human world was the firmament. Ning Kai looked up at the firmament in the autumn rain and found that it was indeed desolate. He felt a little cold. The way of heaven was indeed ruthless. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 575. The autumn rain was chilly in the Buddhist temple. Ning Kai stood in the corridor outside the temple and looked up at the sky. He said, in the front gate of the Devil's Doctrine, Master Lotus once said that the Devil's Doctrine cultivates itself and is a world of its own. That is why the way of heaven does not tolerate it. You said that after cultivators break through the 5 states, they have the opportunity to create their own new rules. In fact, they have their own world, which is not different from the Devil's Doctrine in essence. Naturally, it is not tolerated by the way of heaven. Master Qishan stood up from the chair and walked to his side. He looked up at the sky and said calmly, the classics of Haotian Taoism say that cultivation is a gift from Haotian to human beings. However, if you look at the end, whether it is the obsession of Haotian Taoism to live forever, the desire of the Buddhism sect to reach the nirvana realm, or the wild desire of the Devil's Doctrine to be immortal, they are all trying to break through Haotian's restrictions on human beings. Ning Kai thought of his youngest uncle being punished by heaven and how many great figures in the history of human cultivation had quietly melted into the way of heaven. He felt a chill in his heart and said bitterly, Haotian doesn't care about the underworld invasion, but always stares at the human world. It is really puzzling and annoying. Master Qishan smiled and said, your words and thoughts are already a great blasphemy to Haotian. If you were not a disciple of the academy and if you did not say it in a Buddhist temple, the West Hill Divine Palace would not forgive you. Ning Kai suddenly thought of something and looked back at the master. He asked, I heard that Buddha has read the Ming hand scroll of the tomes of arcane. Master Qishan nodded and said, Buddha created many of his thoughts, but they originated from his reading of the tomes of arcane. I heard that Buddha once wrote a Buddhist scripture to explain it, but it has been lost. Ning Kai learned this secret from the headmaster. He did not understand the Ming hand scroll, so he wanted to know what Buddha had seen from the tomes of arcane. He could not help but feel a little regretful. But Buddha must have mentioned the underworld invasion. In Buddhism, the underworld invasion is called the Dharma ending age. In some ancient scriptures, it is also called the Great Quietus. It is a terrible future. The world has Xiankong Temple and Lenk Temple because of this. You mean the Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival ceremony? Or the legendary Light of Buddha? In fact, the most important mission of the Lenk Temple is to find the son of Yama. Ning-Kei said, Master, you know that I am very sensitive to the word son of Yama. Besides, the Buddhism sect emphasizes on patience. Even if we find him, do we really need to suppress him with the light of Buddha? Grandmaster smiled and said, even if you endure, you still want to know what you are enduring, right? Buddha didn't go through the previous Dharma-ending era. I think when he was undergoing nirvana, he must have been curious about what Yama would do. There's something that I've never understood. Ning-Kei said, even if the legend becomes a reality and the night comes and the underworld invades the human world, why did Yama mention throwing his son into our world? It would be ridiculous to say that he was the vanguard. It would be even more ridiculous to say that he was training his son to inherit the throne in the future. Rumor has it that the underworld king was born at the beginning of time and will die at the end of time. He shines with the light and shadow of Haotian and possesses supreme power. He is unmovable and indestructible, so he is known as the immovable underworld king. Rumor has it that the underworld king lives outside of space and holds an infinite world in his hands. It is vast and boundless. That is why he is called Lord Guangming. However, what he wants to do the most is to turn the human world into the netherworld. Master Qishan said. Ning-Kei suddenly said, the headmaster doesn't believe in the underworld invasion. Master Qishan's expression changed slightly. He asked, the headmaster said that to you? Ning-Kei nodded and said, because the headmaster didn't find where the underworld is. Master Qishan smiled and said, then you can treat it as if I'm telling a story. Ning-Kei said, thank you, master. The master smiled and continued his previous narration. In order to deal with the invasion of the underworld, Haotian created 69,999 fake worlds in the boundless space after the previous catastrophe, and then mixed the real world into them. No matter how powerful the underworld king was, he could not distinguish which world was the real one in the light of Haotian. Therefore, Yama paid the price of sleeping for 1,000 years to separate 70,000 auras and sprinkle them into the 70,000 worlds. These are the 70,000 children of Yama in the legend. The 70,000 children grew up in their own worlds and will wake up one day. Once they wake up, Yama can sense the rules of the world in which they live and confirm whether it is a real or fake world. At this point, Master Qishan was silent for a long time. He softly chanted the name of Buddha and suppressed his exhaustion. He continued, if the son of Yama in this world wakes up, Yama will know the specific location of the human world in the light of Haotian. Then, he will use the son of Yama as a coordinate to descend to the human world. Ning-Kei looked at the pot of tea that was no longer emitting steam and suddenly said, but the night has already come. Finding the son of Yama now is meaningless for our world. The night has not come yet. Everything we can feel now is a sign of a tribulation. Even if the underworld knows our location, it will be difficult for it to come over without the body of the son of Yama. So, the premise of saving the world is to kill the son of Yama? Other than killing, there are other ways. What ways? For example, let him cultivate Buddhism and then be purified by the light? Master, why do I feel that you are talking about me? Ning-Kei, you are really an interesting child. What's interesting about it? What's interesting is that you can control your mind perfectly. I don't understand. If you want to, you can do it. If you don't want to, you can make yourself think of it. This is a very good thing. Master, I said that I am not good at Zen. Then what are you good at? Fighting? Ning-Kei and Master Qishan's voices kept ringing in front of the quiet and slightly cold Buddhist hall. There was no one in the front or back of the hall, so they did not need to worry about being overheard. In the depths of the Buddhist hall, Sangsang had woken up from her meditation. She was holding a scroll of Buddhist scripture and reading it carefully. The floor in front of her and behind her were all covered with Buddhist scriptures. Some of the scriptures were old and the edges of the pages were yellowed. Some of the scriptures were newly printed and still emitted the fragrance of ink. The clear light in the rain outside the hall shone through the window and onto her body. Her thin and small body was wrapped in a black cotton-padded jacket. Her slightly black hair fell on her shoulders. She was reading the scriptures carefully with a calm expression on her face. She did not hear the voices outside the hall at all. At dusk the next day, Ning Kei walked into the meditation room and lit up a stick of incense on a copper plate by the window. Sang Sang put down the scriptures and looked up at him with a happy smile, revealing her 2 white front teeth. Ning Kei asked, "Is it interesting?" Sang Sang nodded and said, "It is." Ning Kei said, "The key is whether it is useful or not." Sang Sang thought for a while and said, "It seems to be useful." Then she explained softly, "It seems that I don't need to think about it. I will forget about it and it will not act up again." You don't need to think about forgetting it. You still have to think about how to make that cold aura disappear. Ning Kei sat down beside her and reached out to hold her wrist. He quietly felt for a moment and confirmed that the cold aura hidden deep in her body had indeed become much calmer than it had been a few days ago. He suddenly noticed that Sang Sang's expression was calm and her entire temperament seemed to have changed. He could not help but feel slightly surprised and wondered if studying Buddhism really had so many benefits. Sang Sang continued to read the scriptures. She was really diligent, probably because she was anxious to cure her illness so that Ning Kei would not worry about her. According to the common concept of Buddhism, this kind of diligent obsession was not necessarily good for studying Buddhism. It might even be a great obstacle. But the strange thing was that it seemed to have no effect on her at all. Ning Kei sat by the window and also began to read the scriptures in the twilight. Reading scriptures in an ancient temple was a very natural thing. He comforted himself in his heart and silently explained to second brother who insisted on slandering Buddhism. He started learning Buddhism yesterday. Although he did not have affinity with Buddhism like Sang Sang, his comprehension was indeed much better than ordinary people. He read the scriptures very quickly and would ask Master Qishan for help when he encountered any difficulties. There was a clap. Ning Kei suddenly closed the scripture in his hand. The sound woke Sang Sang up and she looked up at him. Ning Kei shook his head to indicate that it was okay. Sang Sang continued to read the scriptures. Ning Kei stared at the scripture in his hand in a daze. This scripture was very old, but the edges of the pages were not rolled up. It seemed that few people usually read it. The cover of the scripture was blank. There was no name on it. Ning Kei then remembered that when Master Qishan stuffed this scripture into his hand, his expression was very complicated. It was a little gratified, a little relieved, and also extremely serious. After a long time, he slowly opened the scripture in his hand again. The text in the scripture was not very profound and difficult to understand. It was a method to break the knowledge barrier described by an eminent monk of the previous generation. However, in the warm red twilight, the yellowed scripture faintly revealed other words. There was a layer in this scripture. Ning Kei carefully checked the binding of the Buddhist scripture and confirmed that the pages about the hindrance of knowledge should be a disguise made on the basis of the original thin scripture. With steady hands, he carefully broke the layer of the scripture. More than 10 yellowed pages appeared in front of him. He didn't know what material these pages were made of, and he didn't know what ink the author used. Looking at the color and the feeling, it was probably thousands or even tens of thousands of years old. It was very old, but there was no damage to it. When he held it in his hand, there was no sign of it collapsing into ashes. The handwriting on the pages was not very good in Ning Kei's eyes. But he didn't even dare to blink when he looked at those words. On those pages, the first sentence was, "The wise are the sun and the moon." Ning Kei had seen this sentence on the Ming hand scroll of the tomes of Arcane. So he knew that these pages were the notes made by Buddha after reading the Ming hand scroll. The next chapter will be very late, at least after 12 o'clock. Let me inform you in advance. If you want to sleep early, you can read it tomorrow morning. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 576. Since the sun and the moon correspond, there should be a moon. The sun and the moon rotate, and the light blends, so the moon should be at night. But there are countless tribulations, and there is no moon in the eternal night. This goes against the law of nature. When the night comes, the moon appears. The night in this sentence does not refer to every ordinary night, but the everlasting night. In the everlasting night, the moon appears in the Dharma-ending age, and nature revives. Thus, the world has another way. In that case, it is better to wait for the long night. Why do things against the will of heaven? Is the sky also waiting for the arrival of the night? Or is it afraid of the arrival of the night? Is it afraid of the night itself, or the moon that comes with the night? Buddha's handwriting was very ordinary, no different from that of a teacher in a village school in the Gushan Commandery. The sentences in the notebook were also very casual and easy to understand. Ning Kei read it carefully. The twilight fell on his face, gilding his eyebrows with a layer of golden luster, just like the golden statues of the venerables in the temple. The Viming hand scroll of the tomes of arcane had always been in the academy, casually placed by eldest brother on his waist. He had seen it twice, but always felt confused. Today, seeing the notebook left by Buddha, he finally believed something. In Buddha's view, the everlasting night this time was different from the countless everlasting nights in the human world. Then he remembered that the headmaster did not seem to believe in the underworld invasion, but he never denied the everlasting night would come. He even mentioned that a butcher and a drunkard had lived in the last everlasting night. The biggest difference between the everlasting night this time and the past was probably the character Ming, the character Yu in Ming. It was something that had never been seen in the world, and even the headmaster was confused about. But why was there a moon recorded on the Ming hand scroll? There used to be a moon in this world countless years ago, but it disappeared mysteriously. Then, just as the Buddha predicted, he would reappear during the everlasting night this time. The twilight faded, and the night came. Ning Kei left the meditation room and came to a hut outside the pagoda forest in the backyard of the Lank Temple. He quietly listened to the sound of the stream behind the hut and pushed the door open. Master Xiaofan was not surprised by his arrival. He smiled and said, "Did you find anything?" Ning Kei did not answer the question, but asked, "Isn't it said that Buddha's notes have been lost?" Master Xiaofan said, "Notes that no one can understand are lost. I've been reading this notebook for nearly 100 years, but I still can't understand it. I hope you can." After a moment of silence, Ning Kei asked, "Master, why do you think I can understand it?" The ink characters on the Buddha's notebook gradually floated in front of his eyes and then gradually dispersed, turning into densely packed individual strokes. Some of the strokes hung straight down like a Buddhist pestle, some were thicker, like a Buddhist bell, some were like a copper bowl in the hands of an ascetic monk, and some were like a Buddhist bell in a mountain pavilion. These strokes floated away from the pages of the notes, into his eyes, and then into his sense of perception. They kept flying in his spiritual world, reconstructing an incomprehensible picture. Ning Kei put down the Buddha's notes and looked to the side of the hall. The Lank Temple worshipped the stone statues of the Buddha. There were a dozen of them in the front of the temple, and 4 in the deepest back hall. He was looking at these 4 statues. There were also stone statues of the Buddha in the Wanyan Tower Temple in Chang'an and the White Tower Temple in Yueluan Kingdom. It was said that people with great wisdom could understand the true meaning of the emblematic gestures of Buddhism from these statues. A few days ago, the powerhouse from the Sword Garret of South Jin Kingdom, Mr. Cheng, who had reached the knowing destiny state, had lamented in front of the stone statues of the Buddha in the side hall of the front temple. He could feel the wisdom within, but he could not understand it. The stone statue on the rightmost side of the back hall had a ferocious face, and its eyes were wide open. The hands of the stone statue were exposed, and they seemed to be touching but not touching, forming a very complicated hand gesture. A majestic and stern aura gushed out from the stone statue's fingers. Ning Ke looked at the stone statue of the Buddha quietly for a long time. Then he raised his hands and began to imitate the hand gesture according to the hands of the statue. The hands of the statue of the Buddha maintained a fixed posture. Ning Ke was obviously imitating, but his hands did not stop moving in front of him. Instead, they moved slowly and gestured in front of him. At this moment, there was a fragment of consciousness deep in his sense of perception that seemed to sense something. It lit up slightly and released a very thin psyche. Then it disappeared and calmed down. Ning Ke understood the true meaning of the posture of the hands of the statue of the Buddha, and his hands gradually stopped. He placed one palm vertically in front of him, and the other horizontally behind him. His right index finger was slightly bent in the air, and his left index finger fell on the back of his right palm. It looked very strange and did not have any beauty. This posture was not the same as that of the stone statue of the Buddha. There was not even the slightest similarity. However, at the moment when his left index finger fell on the back of his palm, a chilling aura that was almost identical to that of the stone statue appeared. The dewdrop condensed from the Great Spirit in Ning Ke's abdomen began to spin slowly, releasing streams of pure Great Spirit that were transported to all parts of his body through the seemingly invisible channels. He cultivated the Great Spirit day and night diligently, so he was no stranger to the operation of the Great Spirit. However, he found that the operation of the Great Spirit at this time seemed to be very different from before. The biggest difference was that the Great Spirit in his body was no longer as unruly as before. Instead, it became much more peaceful and gentle. Even the slightest wisp of qi could be completely controlled by him as long as he moved his psyche. After the Great Spirit ran 3 times in his body, Ning Ke only felt comfortable all over. Many senses were so beautiful that he could not help but let out a satisfied sigh, which floated in the quiet night hall. Then he looked at the next stone statue of the Buddha. There are only 2 chapters today. I'll go to bed early to recover my energy. Tomorrow, the last day of the month, I'll try to break out. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 577. Today's monthly ticket, tomorrow's monthly ticket, November's monthly ticket, all the monthly tickets you have this year, please give them to me. Keep muttering. The stone statues in the temple were originally painted with gold lacquer. After many years, the gold lacquer peeled off, revealing the stone inside. Under the dim light, they looked merciful yet terrifying. Ning Ke looked at one statue of the Venerable and then another. He was so focused that he forgot himself and did not feel thirsty or sleepy at all. His hands kept moving in front of him. He did not stop until he finished looking at all 4 statues of the Venerable. He picked up the futon and sat down in front of the temple sill. Facing the night sky, he closed his eyes and began to ponder quietly. Unknowingly, a night had passed. The autumn rain fell on the old temple again, rushing out the thin mist and making the eaves of the temple shine clearly in the morning light. The clear and long bell of the main hall of the front temple spread to the distant back hall. Ning Ke opened his eyes. His eyes were crystal clear and then gradually returned to normal. Looking at the gradually falling autumn rain outside the sill, he raised his right arm and casually stretched it forward. The autumn wind blew in front of the temple and the rain fell restlessly. Suddenly, a huge blank space appeared in the heavy rain. There was not a single drop of rain in that space, which looked extremely dry. If one looked carefully, the blank space in the autumn rain was exactly in the shape of a palm. After a long time, the aura that lingered in front of the temple gradually faded. The slanting autumn rain that did not dare to fall drifted into the range of the invisible palm print, and everything returned to normal. Ning Ke did not understand what he had learned and gained during the night until now. Looking at the heavy autumn rain outside the temple, he could not help but feel a little agitated. Fearlessness, dhyana, exorcism, mindfulness. I did not expect that you could understand the 4 emblematic gestures of Buddhism in one night. Master Qishan's weak but surprised voice came from outside the temple. Ning Ke turned around and bowed to the Grand Master, making a deep bow. He had many things to thank him for. Last night, he had been meditating in the temple, and the Master had guarded him outside the temple for the whole night. Such loving care deserved his sincere bow. Master Qishan looked at Ning Ke and sighed. No matter how deep one's affinity with Buddhism was, or how high one's comprehension ability was, it was impossible for one to comprehend the profound meaning of the 4 great Buddhist hand incantations in one night. This was because the Buddhist hand incantations were not Buddhist Dharma, and Buddhist cultivators could not bypass them and open up their perception. However, the perceptive barrier did not seem to have any effect on Ning Quebec. Master Qishan could feel the aura of Junior Brother Lotus in Ning Ke's body. It was much fainter than yesterday, and he understood the real reason why he could surpass the knowledge barrier. Because Lotus had already overcome these barriers in the past. Master Qishan looked at Ning Ke and thought sadly, "Younger brother, you are constantly leaving this world. Is this how you continue to exist in this world?" Envoys from various countries had already arrived at the Wa Mountain. They were discussing the desolate man's invasion in the front temple and had meetings all day long. In the middle temple, cultivators were discussing what they had seen and heard in the Wa Mountain a few days ago. They recalled the scene of that day with awe and excitement. At the same time, they guessed if any bigwigs would come to the Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival in a few days. Ning Ke and Sang Sang naturally did not care about these things, even though they were invited to attend the Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival. They read Buddhist scriptures and looked at Buddha statues in the back temple of the Lank Temple. They followed Master Qishan to visit the Buddhist Dharma in the halls. Their lives were unusually peaceful, and even their states of mind had become much more tranquil. He still asked Master Qishan about the Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival. After all, this was the grandest festival in the human world. It had a strange origin, and there was a legend about the light of Buddha suppressing the underworld, so he was very curious. How could the Buddhism sect have the ability to suppress the underworld? In the beginning, they only prayed that the night would not come. Later, it gradually evolved into a gathering of the strongest cultivators in the cultivation world to discuss how to deal with it. However, after countless years, the night never came. The legend of the underworld invasion became a real legend. Who would still care about it? Master Qishan smiled and said, "The Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival is held every year, but the time of the cultivators' gathering is not fixed. Even though it has lost its original purpose, the Buddhism sect does not want to lose the opportunity to show itself. The Yueluan Kingdom is known as the 72 Temples of Misty Rain, and only the famous ones. If we count the ordinary temples, I am afraid there are more than 1,000 of them. Moreover, it is adjacent to the Western Wilderness, much closer to the Xiankong Temple. Why didn't the Buddhism sect hold the Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival in the Yueluan Kingdom, such as the White Tower Temple?" Ning Ke asked in confusion. Master Qishan asked, "Do you know where the first big temple that the Xiankong Temple built in the world was?" Ning Ke shook his head. Master Qishan pointed at the eaves under the railings and said, "It is here." Ning Ke was slightly surprised. What was the reason? Master Qishan knew what he was thinking and explained, because it is the closest to the Xiankong Temple. Ning Ke thought that the Xiankong Temple was far away in the depths of the Western Wilderness, while the Lank Temple was located in the southeast. The coastline could be seen from the top of the Tile Mountain. The distance between the two places was obviously the furthest in the world. Why did the master say that it was the closest? Master Xiaofan smiled and said, "It is said that when the Buddha traveled to the southeast, when his disciple was playing chess in the mountains, he suddenly sensed it and pointed to the foot of the mountain from the peak. That was the location of the Lank Temple. The reason for this is that the Lank Temple that we are in now has some kind of connection with the Xiankong Temple." Ning Kai still did not understand the deep meaning hidden in these 6 words. Master Xiaofan turned around and pointed to the back of the hall. He said, "It is said that many years ago, the Buddha comprehended the supreme dharma of unhindered passage through space. He built a simple stone tower there, allowing monks to directly reach the Western Pure Land." Ning Kai said in shock, "I have only heard that the Tang military and the West Hill Divine Palace have some special and powerful talisman arrays that can transmit simple information. I have never heard of any array that can transmit people far away. Isn't this the legendary limitless state?" Master Xiaofan said, "There is no Tianqi in the Buddhism sect. Naturally, there is no limitless state. However, with the Buddha's omnipotent ability, it is not too hard to imagine that he could create such an item." Ning Kai thought of the adventure that he and Sang Sang had on the Buddha's chessboard and the Buddha's notes that had not left him these days. He believed it more and asked nervously, "What about the array now?" Master Xiaofan smiled bitterly and said, "No matter how romantic he would always be blown away by the wind and rain. No matter how powerful Buddha was, after thousands of years, the mana he left behind would have long disappeared. The simple stone pagoda in the legend would have long turned into ashes. The monks in the temple later built a Buddhist hall on the rumored location of the stone pagoda, which is the back hall. Not to mention traces of the past, not even a trace of Buddha can be found." Ning Kai could not help but feel a little emotional when he heard this. In the face of time, only death could be eternal. The entire Tile Mountain belonged to the Lank Temple. Although the Buddhism sect did not expand the temple to include the mountain, the area of the temple was extremely wide. It would take at least half an hour to walk from the square in front of the temple to the Buddha hall in the back of the temple. One could imagine the size of the temple. The ancient temple was divided into 3 parts, the front, the middle, and the back. In the front temple, besides the majestic main gate and the square in front of the temple, there were 2 extremely imposing Buddha halls. The middle temple was relatively small, with nearly 10 Buddha halls scattered around. The back temple was the smallest and the most secluded, with only 1 back hall. The autumn rain continued, and the monks in the temple were busy preparing for the Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival. The diplomatic corps of various countries were still having heated or intense discussions, and the cultivators were still competing with each other. The front temple was solemn and tense, while the middle temple was lively with sword shadows. Only the back temple was still quiet. Ning Kai would occasionally take Sang Sang for a walk in the halls of the middle temple when he had free time to study Buddhism. They walked in the drizzling autumn rain with big black umbrellas and listened to the voices in the halls. They smiled and did not speak. No one noticed their existence, as long as they did not want to be noticed. They also went to the front temple and stood in the pavilion under the autumn trees, watching the dance of the House of Red Sleeves in the courtyard outside the temple. Those young and beautiful girls were sweating and their clothes were swaying, which was very pleasing to the eye. Looking at Xiao Chao on the stage from afar, who was directing and reprimanding with a clear voice, she looked a bit like Mistress Jian. Sang Sang could not help but laugh. Although the dance of the House of Red Sleeves was not as gorgeous as Nichang's, it was more auspicious like the goddess of the Buddhism sect. It should be very successful. Ning Kai and Sang Sang just stood in the pavilion and watched from afar. They did not intend to meet the dance group of the House of Red Sleeves. He did not go to the Tang Empire's diplomatic corps either. The Western General Xian Zhilang had expressed his request for a meeting through the monks in the temple, but he really did not want to be disturbed by worldly affairs. When Master Xiaofan was preaching the Buddhist scriptures, he once said that Buddhism was a way of looking at the world and a way of learning. But most importantly, it was an attitude towards life. His attitude towards life was teased by the headmaster of the academy for keeping his mouth shut, ridiculed by Lotus for pretending to be a turtle, and ridiculed by second brother for pretending to be dead. However, the unique calmness and self-control of the Buddhism sect had its own charm. Now that Sang Sang was recovering from her illness and Ning Ke had learned Buddhism, he was naturally in a peaceful state of mind. In retrospect, the few days in the Lank Temple in the autumn of the 16th year of the Tianqi era were the most peaceful and joyful period of his life. However, it was then that he realized that this peaceful and joyful period was just a sad comfort. On the first day of the Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival, tourists from all over the world came one after another. The small town in front of the Tile Mountain was extremely lively, and the square in front of the Lank Temple was even more crowded. No one knew how many pairs of shoes had been trampled on. If it were not for the monks and the soldiers sent by the local government to maintain order, there would be no way to perform in the square and the ceremony would not have been able to proceed. All the countries in the Central Plains had sent their audience groups and performing guests. The parade of floats attracted waves of cheers. The dance group of the House of Red Sleeves from Chang'an City easily received the most applause and cheers. After that, there was a ceremony led by the abbot of the Lank Temple to pray for the world. Then, there was a divine priest from the divine hall who presided over the worship to heaven. Countless believers knelt on the ground, and the scene was extremely solemn. Ning Ke and Sang Sang did not join in the fun. They stood on the railing of the back temple and looked down at the bustling scene at the foot of the mountain. Looking at this scene, he could not help but laugh and said, "Can they mix and match like this?" After the ceremony, the girls of the House of Red Sleeves began to dance. The applause and cheers in front of the temple suddenly broke through the sky. A few senior monks in the Lank Temple looked at the beautiful and solemn girls dancing on the stage. They did not know if it was because they thought of the story from many years ago, but their eyes became wet. Ning Ke looked at the front of the temple and said with emotion, "After decades, the old temple can finally see the dance of the flower-scattering goddess again. Fortunately, Lian Sheng is dead. I think the Lank Temple will be able to get through this peacefully. If you like this work, you are welcome to vote for it and vote for it. Your support is my greatest motivation." Chapter 578. For ordinary people and tourists, the Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival was a grand festival and the theme of this autumn. But for the real bigwigs, the Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival was just a reason and an excuse for them to meet. They just needed to use this excuse to meet and discuss some real issues. Before the Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival, the diplomatic corps of various countries had reached a final plan. They only needed to submit it to the imperial court of each country for review, and then the emperor or king stamped it with the royal seal. In this plan, all the countries in the Central Plains agreed to continue to send troops to the wilderness next year, and they would greatly increase the number of troops and strengthen the logistics. The Tang Empire was also requested to show its true strength, instead of remaining silent as it did the year before. The reason for this was that the situation in the wilderness had become more and more chaotic. After the desolate man gained a firm foothold, they only needed a year of recuperation before they regained their strength. The left king's palace of the barbarians, who had been fooled by the countries of the Central Plains in the last war, finally came to their senses after paying a heavy price in blood. They began to wander between the Central Plains and the desolate man and tried to take revenge. The desolate man had left the world for too long, and the barbarians were the masters of the wilderness for the past 1,000 years. Although the left king's palace had lost a lot of power, they were very familiar with the wilderness. If they really got entangled with the Central Plains countries, they could hide in the vast Min Mountain even if they were defeated. The Central Plains countries had no better way to deal with them. What the Central Plains countries were most wary of was the cavalry of the left king's palace. Under such a heavy loss, they might really give up the dignity of the left king's palace and turn to the Golden Palace. The Golden Palace had been very quiet for decades. Many people in the Central Plains had forgotten the existence of this ferocious beast. But the officials and nobles knew very well that the South Jin Kingdom was said to be the second most powerful country in the world. In fact, the second most powerful country in the world was still the Golden Palace. The Golden Palace had the best cavalry, the most horses, and the most high priests. If it were not for the Min Mountain, the several valiant Chanyu of the Golden Palace would have already unified the entire wilderness. And if it were not for the Tang Empire's hundreds of years of unyielding resistance in the south, the cavalry of the Golden Palace would have swept the Central Plains much earlier, or even to the foot of the Peach Mountain of West Hill. In the face of the envoy's anger and pleading, the Tang Empire's envoys finally agreed to sign the plan. On the one hand, it was because of the pressure from the West Hill Divine Palace, but more importantly, it was for the Tang Empire's own strategic considerations. The Tianqi Mountains and the Min Mountain were actually the same mountain range. They stretched for thousands of miles and ran through the north of the mainland, cutting the wilderness into two halves. However, there was a very narrow valley in the middle that divided the wilderness into the north and the south. The people of the Central Plains used to call it the Southern Min Mountain and the Northern Min Mountain, while the grassland barbarians used to call the Northern Min Mountain as Tianqi Mountain. If the left king's palace wanted to contact the Golden Tribe royal court and even fight together, their cavalry had to pass through the valley. To the west of the valley was the city that the Tang Empire had spent countless manpower and resources to build. This was the farthest and most important city from the Great Tang. Chang'an would never allow that city to be threatened. The envoys from the front temple had already finished their mission. They either went to the town to have fun with the people or left early to rush back to their respective capitals to report on the outcome of the discussion. The cultivators from various sects were still in the Middle Temple. If it was any other day, the heads of these cultivation sects would definitely leave with the bigwigs from various countries. Because of the West Hill Divine Palace, they had to listen to the orders of the royal families. However, the situation was different this year. They had to wait for the bigwigs in the back temple to speak. The bigwigs in the back temple were the real bigwigs. Whether it was Mr. Cheng from the Sword Garret or Aunt Cuny Maddie and the flower addict Lu Qinjia, they could all ignore the affairs of their respective countries. Moreover, this year, the president of the commandment yard of the Xiankong Temple and the representatives from the Academy and the West Hill Divine Palace were there. The representative from the Academy was naturally Ning Quebec Sang was very qualified to be the representative of the West Hill Divine Palace. However, she only had the title of the Divine Hall and did not have any specific duties. Most importantly, the Divine Hall knew very well that the Lady of Light would definitely not care about these affairs, so they sent a divine priest to help. The divine priest was Ning Kei's acquaintance. He was the priest of the Divine Hall of Revelation, Cheng Lixue. Ning Kei looked at Cheng Lixue and said helplessly, "How could the Divine Hall think of helping? If Sang really said something, would you really listen to her? Who would believe that?" Cheng Lixue smiled and said, "If the Lady of Light is really willing to express her opinion, of course I will respect her opinion. And I believe that no one in the Divine Hall will object to her opinion." Don't say such repetitive words to express goodwill in the future. It's meaningless. Ning Kei looked at him and said, "You should have heard about the rumor about my origin." Cheng Lixue looked calm and said, "I have heard about it." Ning Kei asked, "Do you believe it?" Cheng Lixue smiled and said, "I don't know." Ning Kei asked, "Does the great divine priest of Revelation know about it?" Cheng Lixue shook his head and said, "The great divine priest said that he doesn't know either." Ning Kei said, "Then if someone in Haotian Taoism says that I am the son of Yama, don't blame me for being rude." Cheng Lixue said helplessly, "If you don't mention it yourself, who would dare to mention that rumor in front of you?" Ning Kei smiled and said, "Spreading a rumor may bring a moment of pleasure, but the whole family will die. I am just reminding you. Chen Lixue really didn't want to continue this meaningless conversation with him. He took out a letter from his sleeve and handed it to Ning Quebec. He said, "This is a letter from the great divine priest of judgment. He wants me to hand it to you personally." Ning Ke was slightly stunned. He took the letter and opened it. It was indeed Yi Hongyu's handwriting. In the letter, Yi Hongyu briefly described the process of chasing after Prince Long Qing outside the north of Yan Kingdom. She didn't go into detail about the thunder by the Blue Lake. She only told him that Long Qing was not dead, and that he had met up with the left king's palace with dozens of powerful fallen knights and escaped into the depths of the wilderness. Long Qing was actually able to escape from Yi Hongyu's sword. This was very different from Ning Ke's prediction. He guessed that something must have happened, but since Yi Hongyu refused to tell him, there was nothing he could do. Thinking of the black peach blossom and the aura of quietus, Ning Ke felt uneasy and vigilant. He was very clear about how powerful and terrifying Long Qing was now. Especially his strange devouring skill, it would make him powerful at an astonishing speed. That day in the autumn rain in front of the Red Lotus Temple, if Long Qing hadn't been so shocked by the practice of Tao Tai that he only wanted to escape, he might have died in the hands of this person. Although there were no Haotian Taoism cultivators in the wilderness, there were many priests and sorcerers. Without preparation, these priests and sorcerers were the most delicious and fat lambs in Long Qing's eyes. A person who should have died long ago refused to die, and became more and more terrifying and powerful. Ning Ke even felt a little admiration for Long Qing. He slowly raised his eyebrows and thought silently, would the saying that they were lifelong enemies that had been circulating for years become a reality? Yi Hongyu's letter had 2 pieces of paper. On the second piece of paper, she drew a sword. Ning Ke looked at the paper and felt the hidden sword style in it. He could vaguely feel the unwillingness and strength when she drew the sword. He could not help but feel a chill in his heart and murmured, "You actually have another realization so soon. Can you not be so powerful? This will make me look very weak." Although he said so, in fact, he was very grateful to Yi Hongyu. She drew a sword to let him know that she had another realization of the day sword. Naturally, she was worried that he would be too slow and would not be a match for Long Qing in the future. Of course, Ning Ke also understood that with the character of the Tao addict, apart from the above reasons, the more important reason should be that she was worried that he would fall too far behind and that it would be meaningless to kill him in the future. Chen Lixue heard his previous words and could not help but say bitterly, "When I saw you in the wilderness, you had not yet entered the see-through state. Today, you have actually entered the knowing destiny state. If this is considered weak, then should I immediately dig a hole and jump in front of you and the divine priest of judgment?" Ning Ke patted his shoulder to comfort him, "A contented person will always be happy." Chen Lixue almost spat out a mouthful of blood, staining his snow-white eyebrows. After a while, he said helplessly, "I finally understand why Prince Long Qing was so angry when he returned to the Divine Hall after losing to you in Chang'an. No matter who lost the opportunity to become a student of the headmaster of the academy, everyone would be as angry as him. Moreover, it is really difficult to sleep after losing to someone like you." Ning Ke said with a smile, "I did not do anything at that time. I only asked him if he wanted to eat a cake." Ordinary cultivation sects were naturally not qualified to participate in the meeting at the back hall of the Lank Temple. They could only wait in the middle of the temple and discuss. However, looking at their expressions, they were not very nervous or solemn. Those who could not look up at the sky naturally did not know how high the sky was. Those who could not come into contact with the true secrets naturally could not see the danger ahead and were easy to be happy. These cultivators still thought that the underworld invasion was only a legend, so of course they were not nervous. The 4 stone statues of the Venerables sat silently at the side of the hall. The hall was still quiet because only a few people were qualified to sit in the hall. Master Xiaofan sat in the middle, his thin face full of benevolence. Monk Guanhai stood beside him. Ning Ke and Sang Sang sat to the left of the master. Master Bushu, the president of the commandment yard of the Xiankong Temple, sat to the right of the master. No matter how noble the other people in the hall were in the world, they had to show enough respect in front of the representatives of the two unknown places. Cheng Lixue represented the West Hill Divine Palace and sat to the right of Sang Sang. Cuni Mati, the powerhouse of the sword Garrett Cheng Zicheng, Mo Shanshan, and the flower addict Lu Qinjia sat in order. Master Dongming, who presided over the second game of chess on the Hua Mountain, was also in the hall. However, he did not sit with the others, but under the side wall. He looked at Sang Sang and smiled slightly, looking very calm and relaxed. There were only 10 people in the hall, but these 10 people could represent the entire cultivation world. Everyone knows that there will be a big show, so I have been constantly revising the outline. It took too much time and energy. This is the second chapter. I have written a lot of the third chapter, but I am thinking about how to change it. I will update it before 10 o'clock. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 579. Master Xiaofan was the first to speak. He looked at the people in the hall and said tiredly, "Of course you don't think the legend is just a legend. There have been many signs of the everlasting night's arrival. The year before last, Mr. First of the Academy went to the cold region of the far north and found that the nights there had indeed lengthened and the temperature had dropped sharply. Even the hot sea had signs of being frozen." Cheng Lixue leaned forward slightly to greet the crowd and said, "The Hierarch Lord did indeed see a strange layer of ice deep in the sea of storms in the screen of light." Master Xiaofan sighed and said, "Mr. First also mentioned in the letter that Chang and City froze 2 days earlier and 3 days earlier than last year." Cheng Zicheng frowned slightly and said, "But this year, Chang and City has entered autumn later than last year. I always thought that it was normal for the climate to change between years." At this moment, Master Bushu, the president of the commandment yard of the Xiankong Temple, said slowly, "There is no need to argue about this matter. The desolate men have come south, which proves that Mr. First's vision is not false. We cannot waste time on such pointless discussions. The first thing we need to consider is how to deal with the invasion of the underworld." After Master Bushu entered the Lank Temple, he had not come out. When they were on the mountain, he had sat silently in the Buddhist chariot. This was the first time many people in the hall, including Ning Ke, had seen his true face. The eminent monk's eyebrows were like a ruler and his eyes were pure. His brows were slightly frosty and there were a few wrinkles on his forehead. His Dharma image was solemn, but no one could guess his true age. Master Bushu came from the unknown lands and was an important figure like the president of the commandment yard. In terms of status, he was undoubtedly the highest in the room. Therefore, when he spoke, Cheng Zicheng shut his mouth and expressed his agreement. After the Xiankong Temple confirmed that the underworld invasion was not a legend, the temple became even quieter. It was not easy to accept the fact that a legend had become a reality. Both Cheng Zicheng and Cuni Mati were silently thinking that they would encounter the end of the world that countless generations of cultivators had not encountered before. Master Bushu looked around at the crowd and said sternly, "The underworld invasion must be a very long process. Perhaps our generation will not be able to experience it. But as the saying goes, the ancestors plant trees and the descendants benefit from the shade. For the survival of the human world, we must start preparing now." Everyone knew that they had to prepare, but what should they prepare? The hall once again became extremely quiet. Monk Guanhai walked out of the hall, took some hot water, and began to serve tea to the guests. In the past, Master Xiaofan had doted on his young disciple and was unwilling to tell him too many gloomy stories about the future. So this was the first time he had participated in such an occasion. In fact, if it weren't for the fact that ordinary monks couldn't hear the discussion in the hall, he wouldn't have had the chance to do this job. Therefore, he was a little excited and a little nervous. His hands trembled as he held the teacup. How could he notice how many tea leaves he had put in the teacup and what kind of tea leaves he had put in? Ning Kai was not interested in this kind of discussion. In his opinion, if the underworld really invaded, how could these people in the hall discuss the real countermeasures? Where did they put the Abbey Dean of Jishou Abbey, the chief preaching monk of Xiankong Temple, and the headmaster of Academy? However, the people in the back of the mountain of the Academy were a bunch of lazy people who did not like to care about worldly affairs. He was forcibly assigned the title of the person who entered the human realm, so he had to represent the Academy on such an occasion. But he did not expect that this discussion would soon involve himself. The underworld invasion requires Yama to project himself into our world, and it requires the body of the son of Yama as a channel. 16 years ago, there was a strange phenomenon in the wilderness, and the world wayfarers of various sects gathered there. It was because both Xiankong Temple and Jishou Abbey had sensed that the son of Yama had descended into our world. Master Bushu said slowly, and then glanced at Ning Quebec. Ning Kai knew what his glance meant. He was slightly shocked, but his expression did not change. Kuni Mati stared at him with hatred, and said in a hoarse voice, "Then the most important thing we should do now is to find the son of Yama, and then, kill him." Master Xiaofan took the teacup from Monk Guanhai's hands, and lowered his head to blow lightly. He did not speak. Everyone in the hall knew who Kuni Mati was alluding to. After all, after the battle between Ning Kai and Xia Ho, the judgment of the great divine priest of light had long been spread, and the Buddhism sect seemed to hold the same view. But without evidence, who would dare to say that the core disciple of the headmaster of the Academy was the son of Yama? In the past year, no one had dared to say this in front of Ning Kai, and even the rumor had gradually faded. After all, no one had seen Yama, but all cultivators knew that the Academy could not be angered. So when Kuni Mati said this, no one in the hall responded. No one pretended to be ignorant and asked who the son of Yama was. It was still quiet. Kuni Mati did not seem to expect to face such a situation. She raised her eyebrows, and her eyes became more and more resentful. She stared at Ning Kai and said, "Mr. 13, don't you have anything to say?" Ning Kai said, "I want to say, can you not beat around the bush?" Kuni Mati was furious, and her chest heaved up and down. She said sternly, "I am talking about you. You are the son of Yama." Ning Kai had long expected that someone would make things difficult for him today, but he did not know whether it would be Kuni Mati or Master Bushu. At this moment, he finally confirmed that the old nun was indeed the most annoying creature. But after all, this was the first time that the rumor had been put on the table. The people in the hall had complicated looks in their eyes. Mo Shanshan looked at Ning Kai quietly with a slightly worried expression. Ning Kai looked at her and said calmly, "If you have no evidence, don't speak casually." Kuni Mati sneered and said, "Back then, the great divine priest of light determined that the son of Yama was born in the Xianwei general's mansion in Chang'an. Now you are the only living person in that mansion. If you are not the son of Yama, who is? So you are talking about my wife's teacher." Ning Kai said, "But he is already dead, so he can't be a witness. And even if what you said were his last words, this testimony has no effect. No matter how good one's eyesight is, there will be times when he makes a mistake. Don't forget that because of this matter, he was beaten down by the Abbey Dean and imprisoned by the West Hill Divine Palace for more than 10 years. If you insist that he is right, does that mean that the Abbey Dean is wrong and the West Hill Divine Palace is wrong?" Kuni Mati was speechless for a moment. No matter how high her status in the Buddhism sect and the secular world was, no matter how respected she was, she would not dare to directly accuse the Abbey Dean of the Jishou Abbey of being wrong in public. Ning Ke looked at her and shook his head. He said, "You really don't know what you are talking about." Then he looked at Cheng Lixue and asked, "I am not a troublemaker, and I don't think she has the guts to disrespect the entire Haotian Taoism. But what did we say just now? What do you mean the whole family died?" Cheng Lixue smiled bitterly and did not speak. He thought to himself that Ning Ke was not afraid of offending people, but he did not want to become enemies with the old woman. Although Quni Madi did not know about the conversation between Ning Ke and Cheng Lixue, she knew that it was not something good when she heard that the whole family had died. Moreover, these 5 words happened to touch upon her greatest pain. She could not help but feel grief and anger at the same time, and the wrinkles on her face were full of resentment. Ning Ke looked at her calmly and said, "If you do not want to bring trouble to the Yueluan kingdom, then say something meaningful. Although you are of low status, you are not young. Don't mess around like you did in the wilderness." His voice was very calm and did not sound mean. However, between his words, there was a strong sense of an elder lecturing a junior, which could not be concealed. Quni Madi's grief and anger grew, and she trembled with anger. Master Bushu frowned slightly, as if he was dissatisfied with Ning Ke's performance. The lively argument in the hall was meaningless. Sang Sang knew that Ning Ke was not someone who was willing to be at a disadvantage, be it in terms of words or knives. Naturally, she was not worried, and even a little distracted. She took a cup of tea from Monk Guanhai. The tea in the cup was not the green tea that Master Qishan was used to drinking, but scented tea. Sang Sang lowered her head and smelled the pure fragrance of the tea. She looked at the little jasmine flower floating in the clear tea and felt that she liked it very much. Ning Ke suddenly felt uneasy. Sang Sang picked up the teacup and was about to take a sip when she felt an inexplicable uneasiness. She frowned slightly and moved her wrist slightly, preparing to put the teacup down. The flower addict, Lu Chenjia, was unusually quiet in the hall today. She lowered her head and did not speak. Although she was the princess of the Yueluan kingdom and the focus of the West Hill Divine Palace, she could only be ranked last in terms of status and power in such an occasion. It was natural for her to remain silent. Moreover, she had been very quiet ever since she came to Hua Mountain. Even her expression was indifferent, so no one in the hall felt that there was anything strange about her. However, when Sang Sang picked up the cup of scented tea, she raised her head. Lu Chenjia's eyes were still cold and her expression was still indifferent. It was the same expression that made Ning Ke feel a chill in Hua Mountain. However, if one looked closely, one could see that her flower-like lips were trembling slightly. It was nervousness and excitement. Sang Sang frowned slightly and seemed to be about to put down the teacup. Lu Chenjia pursed her trembling lips and a sad but determined smile appeared on her face. She exerted some strength in her fingers, which were hidden in her sleeves, and broke the stem of a wilted flower. Its petals scattered in all directions. A faint aura was instantly released from her sleeves. A shocking change happened in the teacup in Sang Sang's hands. The jasmine flower that was slowly moving in the clear tea seemed to have been injected with some kind of vitality. It actually bloomed in the teacup. Several petals broke off the stem and struggled out of the tea. With a strong aura, it attacked Sang Sang's face. The teacup had just left Sang Sang's lips and was very close to her face. It was so close that it was difficult for her to react. Be it the West Hill divine skills or the Buddhist Dharma that she had just learned, she could not react in time. She widened her eyes and looked at the jasmine flower petals that were still in the tea flying towards her. At this moment, she only had time to think. Chapter 3 delivered. Chapter 4 out before midnight. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 580. A few days ago in the Hua Mountain Monastery, Ning Ke and the flower addict had exchanged a few words through the wall. When he returned to the room to help Sang Sang dress, he handed her a brocade pouch and told her to remember to tell him in her heart if anything happened. Telling him in her heart was just thinking about it. That was why Sang Sang did not forget to think about it when she had no time to do anything in the face of the sudden attack. Ning Ke knew when she thought about it. That was why Ning Ke thought about it. With a thought, the silk pouch hidden in Sang Sang's sleeve was triggered. The light in the dark Buddhist hall suddenly changed shape, especially the space in front of Sang Sang. The powerful talisman power from the brocade pouch distorted it into countless overlapping mirrors. The jasmine flower petals that splashed out from the tea landed on those mirrors. The collision of the two auras caused a strong wind to blow in the hall. The dust that had accumulated in the cracks of the bricks was blown out, causing smoke and dust to rise. The petals landed on the mirrors and trembled as they tried to drill into them. However, they could only penetrate 2 or 3 layers before they became powerless and twisted. They were crushed into mud and scattered. The flower addict, Wuxia, who was sitting in the corner, looked extremely shocked. Her beautiful face looked like it was in extreme pain. She spat out a mouthful of blood and wet her clothes. After a while, the aura of the talisman surrounding the Buddhist hall gradually dissipated. The countless layers of mirror protection in front of Sang Sang also disappeared without a trace. The powder of the jasmine petals mixed with the tea that had been torn into the finest water droplets and gently splashed on her face. It was slightly damp. Ning Ke slowly stood up and looked at Wuxia without any emotion on his face. He had never been worried about his and Sang Sang's safety on this trip to the Lank Temple before he met the Buddhist chariot. Just as he had told Xian Zhilang, in this world, those who were stronger than him would not dare to provoke him because of his background. Those who were ignorant and dared to provoke him would not dare to provoke him. However, this was not an absolutely rational world. There were still lunatics like Long Qing, and many people would become crazy for various reasons, such as losing their children or husbands. Ning Ke was very grateful to Long Qing for giving him a fatal blow in the autumn rain in front of the Red Lotus Temple. This allowed him to regain the cautiousness and calmness he had in Min Mountain. When he talked to Wuxia in the monastery on Tile Mountain, especially when he saw her eyes, he had always been wary that this woman would go crazy like Long Qing. That was why he placed the brocade pouch beside Sang Sang. In that brocade bag, there was a talisman left by Master Yen Sei. Although I can't accept it, I can understand. You've always wanted to kill me because of what happened to your fiancé, but this has nothing to do with Sang Sang. Why would you do this? Ning Ke asked Wuxia. Wuxia raised her arm and wiped the blood from the corner of her lips. A crazed smile appeared on her pale and beautiful face. She said, I am very sure that killing the current me can only free myself and not cause me pain. Since I want you to be in pain, why would I kill you? She stared at Ning Ke with hatred and said in a trembling voice, You once killed the most important person to me. Do you know how it feels? It was your entire world being destroyed in front of you. The more beautiful the past, the more painful it is for you to live now. You killed Long Qing, which is equivalent to destroying my world. You turned me into a walking corpse. I live in pain every day and struggle on the edge of collapse. Ning Ke said, Many people have experienced this kind of pain. No. You don't know. You will never know what kind of pain it is. Wuxia cried and said pitifully, If you have never lost someone, how would you know that the pain would tear your heart into pieces? That's why I was really happy when I knew that Sang Sang was about to die. Ning Ke looked at her and said, When you found out that Master Qishan could cure Sang Sang's illness, you couldn't bear it anymore and decided to kill her yourself? Wuxia looked at him and said in a daze, That's right. I wanted you to watch the most important person die in front of you. I wanted you to feel that kind of pain. Ning Ke said, "It's a pity that I will never be able to feel the pain you are feeling now. But I am more curious. Long Qing is not dead yet. Where does your pain come from?" Lu Qinjia smiled bitterly when she heard this. She said in extreme pain, "Yes, he is not dead yet. But he has become neither a human nor a ghost. He is like a dog being chased by the West Hill Divine Palace into the wilderness. He has even abandoned the faith that he has held onto for half his life and turned into a devil. Isn't living like this scarier than dying? Compared to now, I would rather you shoot him to death in the wilderness that year. In my opinion, living in any way is better than dying." Ning Ke shook his head and said, "I don't understand now. Do you like Long Qing as a person, or do you like the Prince of the Yen Kingdom, the symbol hidden under the glorious appearance of the West Hill Divine Prince? If he is really the most important person to you, then no matter how his identity changes, how his standpoint changes, whether he is dazzling or ugly, whether he is a deity or a monster, whether he is a saint or a devil, he will still be the most important person in your heart. Unless you like that shell. But if you like that shell, it is still unreasonable for you to be in so much pain because of that shell." His voice was very calm. He was not deliberately sarcastic or harsh, but every word hit the heart. Lu Qinjia's face turned even paler. She said, "I did not expect you to have the patience to talk to me for so long." Ning Ke shook his head and said, "I just want to peel off your skin and make you feel more pain." His simple and sincere words sounded so cold when they entered the ears of the people in the hall. No one had expected the flower addict, Lu Qinjia, to suddenly assassinate Sang Sang while they were discussing the underworld invasion. No one knew how to deal with this. Not to mention Sang Sang's noble status in the West Hill Divine Palace, even Ning Ke would not let this go. What would he do? Not everyone in the hall had interacted with Ning Ke and knew his temperament as well as Cheng Lixue. But everyone knew the style of the people from the academy who had entered the human realm. Thinking of Mr. Ku, some people's expressions changed. Master Qishan sighed and looked at Lu Qinjia with pity. He said, "There are many people in the world who suffer from infatuation." Master Bushu looked at Ning Quebec. His lips moved slightly as he prepared to plead for the flower addict. After all, Lu Qinjia was the princess of the Yueluan kingdom, and the Yueluan kingdom was the most important and even the only secular kingdom of the Buddhism sect in the world. The people of the Buddhism sect could not just watch as something happened to her. Ning Ke did not give Master Bushu a chance to plead for her. With a clang, he unsheathed his padao. He stood in front of the futon and slashed through the air. As he slashed down, the padao in his hand suddenly became bright. Countless rays of golden light shot out from the gloomy saber body. Like the sun rising from the clouds, it lit up the dark hall and covered the flower addict, Lu Qinjia. Divine light. Cheng Ziqing, a powerhouse from the sword garret, looked at the golden light that shot out from Ning Ke's padao. Back when Lu Yiqing was defeated by Ning Ke at the side door of the academy, there was news that Ning Ke had learned the West Hill divine skills. However, the sword garret did not believe it and felt that there was something fishy about it. Until today, when he saw Ning Ke's padao burning with Haotian's divine light, Cheng Ziqing finally knew that the rumors were true. Cheng Lixue, the priest of the West Hill Divine Palace, had a complicated expression on his face. He had seen Ning Ke's padao burning with divine light at the side door of the academy, but he did not expect the divine light on his padao to become even stronger. The powerhouses in the hall looked at the blade and their expressions turned cold. They were watching from the side, so they did not have to close their eyes. However, the flower addict, Lu Qinjia, was covered by the divine light that shot out from the padao and had to close her eyes. In fact, she had already closed her eyes before Ning Ke waved his padao. She did not want to live, so she was waiting for death. However, there was no one who could just watch her die without doing anything. Cuny Maddie screamed and jumped up from the futon. She came in front of Wuxia and held her walking stick horizontally. An experienced and pure Buddhist aura was born from the momentum. Ning Kei's padao swept through the hall and landed heavily on the walking stick. Haotian's divine light and the thick Buddhist aura on the walking stick clashed and scattered in all directions like a burning flame. Cuny Madi closed her eyes tightly. The deep wrinkles on her face were clearly illuminated by the divine light. It was as if there were countless golden lines on her face, and it was like molten lava that could collapse at any time. In just an instant, the old woman's hands, which were holding onto the two ends of the walking stick, trembled violently. Her face looked especially painful. With a muffled groan, she fell and hit the wall, spitting out a mouthful of blood. Ning Kei's padao momentum was exhausted. He lifted his right foot and walked to the other side. Cuny Madi sat leaning against the wall, her body covered in blood. She looked at the approaching Ning Kei, her old face full of fear and pain. She screamed angrily, "What are you waiting for?" No one in the hall knew who this old aunt was seeking help from. Master Bushu sighed softly and formed a mudra with his hands in front of him. The mudra was very strange. The index finger of the right hand was slightly bent, like a naughty child flicking a stone. A merciful and chilling aura of the Buddhism sect attacked Ning Quebec. Master Bushu was the president of the commandment yard of the Xiankong Temple. If one were to judge him by his cultivation state, he was at least in the knowing destiny state. No one in the hall could rival him except for Cheng Zicheng. Ning Kei's real cultivation state was still far from this eminent monk's. He had been able to intimidate the monk on Tile Mountain because he had the primordial 13 arrows in his hands. Moreover, that arrow had been prepared for a long time and was extremely powerful. Today in the hall, Ning Kei was holding a padao instead of a bow. However, there was no fear on his face. He ignored the power of the Buddhist mudra and rushed forward. Cuny Madi shouted angrily and tried to raise her crutch again. Ning Kei slashed down. The crutch broke and Cuny Madi vomited blood again. The Buddhist mudra had already reached Ning Kei's back. Ning Kei raised his eyebrows and the tip of the padao swept past Wuxia's cheek. Then, his left hand formed a bird's beak by his side. The aura of the Buddhist mudra paused slightly. Ning Kei floated back and stood in front of Sang Sang. The Buddhist mudra finally landed on the ground. There was a soft rustling sound and the hard stone floor of the hall sank slightly. A strand of hair fell from Wuxia's face. A bloody wound appeared on her face. Chapter 4. There are 2 more chapters today. The update will be late. Everyone has to work tomorrow, so go to bed early. Also, it's past midnight now and it's already November. The new monthly votes have arrived. Everyone, hurry up and vote for me. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 581. Wuxia felt that her face was wet and cold. She reached out her hand and felt the blood on her hand. Looking at her blood-stained hand, she was in a trance. She squeezed out a smile on her pale face and slowly raised her hands to cover her face. Then, she suddenly burst into tears. Tears and blood dripped down from the gaps between her fingers. She cried in pain, not because of the wound on her face and the possibility of disfigurement, but because she realized that it was difficult for her to avenge Long Qing in front of Ning Quebec. The people in the temple looked at the flower addict, who was crying bitterly and covering her face. They looked at the ground that had been crushed by Master Bushu's emblematic gesture. They looked at Ning Kei, who was standing silently with his blade. The academy enjoyed a high prestige in the cultivation world, but that was because the headmaster of the academy was highly respected. He was also related to the legendary Mr. First and Mr. Second. However, few people thought that Ning Ke was very strong. No one knew whether it was from the Tao addict or the calligraphy addict, but everyone agreed that Ning Ke was the weakest world wayfarer in the history of the unknown lands. Even though he had challenged and killed Xia Ho at the cold winter lake last year, the powerhouses in the cultivation world thought that it was mainly because General Xia Ho had been seriously injured by Tang, the wayfarer of the Devil's Doctrine, and Sang Sang, the Lady of Light, had performed amazingly in that battle. This had nothing to do with his talent in understanding. In their eyes, Ning Ke had only been in the academy for a few years. Even if he had the opportunity to enter the knowing destiny state, it was not long ago. How could he not be at a disadvantage when faced with the Xiankong Temple's eminent monks? Moreover, he had seriously injured Cuny Madi and cut the flower addict's face before retreating. That was the flower addict, who was famous for her beauty among the 3 addicts in the world. How could Ning Ke be so cruel to her? While everyone in the hall was shocked by Ning Ke's strength, they were also frightened by his ruthlessness. Ning Ke did not care about what others thought. The rules of the academy were simple. Other than the toughness of one's fist, the most important thing was the principle of reciprocity. If you wanted to kill me, I would definitely kill you. If you wanted to kill Sang Sang, I would kill you even more. If not for Master Bushu's powerful Buddhist sect handprint, his blade would have cut off Lu Chenjia's head. Xiankong Temple wants to interfere in the academy's affairs? Ning Ke looked at Master Bushu. Ever since he saw the Buddhist chariot on Tile Mountain, he had been on guard. He knew the relationship between the Buddhism sect and the Yueluan kingdom, but he didn't know how far they would go. Master Bushu looked at him silently. His gaze landed on his left hand, which was at the side of his waist. When he displayed the emblematic gesture of the Buddhism sect, Ning Ke's left hand made a beak gesture. It was precisely that beak-like technique that caused the downward momentum of the giant handprint to stagnate. Master Bushu did not know the origin of Ning Ke's hand gesture and guessed that it was a supreme art of the academy. However, he still did not understand why Ning Ke seemed to have such a deep understanding of the Buddhism sect's giant handprint. In the eyes of the people in the hall, Master Bushu's silence was due to another reason. Cuny Madi held Lu Chenjia in her arms. She looked at the blood on her face and thought of her son who had died tragically in Chang'an. Her expression became even more vicious. She stared at Ning Ke fiercely and shouted with a hoarse and painful voice, "You bastard! You killed Master Daosher of Xiankong Temple and injured Chenjia like this. I, Yueluan, will never forgive you. Even Buddha will not forgive you." Everyone in the hall was silent. Everyone knew that the battle between Master Daosher of Xiankong Temple and Ning Ke on the morning street of Chang'an was, in a sense, a challenge from the Buddhism sect to the people of the academy who had entered the human realm. No matter how one looked at it, Ning Ke had not done anything wrong. However, everyone knew very well why Cuny Madi was so sad. "You kill me, I kill you," Ning Ke said. Long Qing betrayed Haotian. The West Hill Divine Palace has issued an edict that everyone has the right to kill him. Princess Chenjia tried to kill the Lady of Light for this thief. What's wrong with me punishing her on behalf of the Divine Hall? Everyone in the hall looked at Priest Cheng Lixue, who was the true representative of the West Hill Divine Palace. Cheng Lixue's expression was calm and he did not speak. Not to mention that the flower addict had indeed violated the West Hill Divine Palace's taboo. Even if she had not, the Divine Hall would not have said anything about Ning Ke being the future husband of the Lady of Light. Ning Ke looked at Cuny Madi and said, "As for Daosher dying in my hands, you can do it if you want to avenge your illegitimate son. Why do you have to involve the Buddhism sect and Yueluan kingdom? I really want to know whether Buddha can't tolerate me or you, an old nun who doesn't follow the precepts." Hearing this, Master Bushu's expression froze. Ning Ke looked at him and repeated his previous question, "Is the Xiankong Temple sure about this? The Buddha is merciful. The Xiankong Temple has held this belief and has rarely participated in the affairs of the secular world. I should not have interfered in the feud between you and Princess Chenjia. Master Bushu's expression gradually became serious. His voice was like the ringing of a bell. He said, however, Mr. 13 has actually entered the devil's way. How can the Xiankong Temple ignore it? I saw it with my own eyes. How can I ignore it? Hearing this, everyone in the hall looked at Ning Kei's feet. Their expressions became strange. Only then did Ning Kei notice that there were a few pieces of gravel under his feet. There was a small gray dot at the waist of his black academy uniform. Judging by the color, it should be a mark left by a stone. Only then did he remember that Master Bushu's Buddhism sect emblematic gesture was a little strange. The right hand was stretched out and the index finger was slightly bent. It looked like a child flicking a stone. So he was really flicking a stone. A cultivator's body was as fragile as an ordinary person's. Even a powerhouse at the peak of the knowing destiny state could be easily cut open by a butcher. Of course, that was if the powerhouse did not fight back. Only two kinds of cultivators could use their own bodies to shatter a hard stone. In the previous battle, no one had felt Ning Kei use his psyche power to summon the chi of heaven and earth to protect his body. This naturally meant that the rumors of him cultivating in both talisman and martial arts were not true. At the same time, it also meant that he was cultivating in the devil's doctrine, which could not be allowed in the world. There was dead silence in the hall. No one spoke. No one knew what to say at this time. Cheng Lishua looked at Ning Kei in shock. As the saying went, Taoism and the devil could not coexist. As the Grand Master of the Revelation Department of the West Hill Divine Palace, he should have stood up angrily and killed a cultivator who had joined the devil. However, Ning Kei was not an ordinary person. He was Mr. 13 of the Academy, the core disciple of the headmaster of the Academy. Even if the Hierarch Lord was present, he would also feel that this matter was very troublesome, let alone Cheng Lishua. Cheng Lishua's mind was in a mess. He wanted to stand up, but he did not want to. He did not know what to do. At this moment, he suddenly saw Sang Sang and calmed down. He felt very lucky. With the Lady of Light above, he did not have the right to represent the West Hill Divine Palace to express their stance on this matter. As for the close relationship between the Lady of Light and Ning Kei, it would not mean that the Divine Hall would send down a thunderbolt. So what did it have to do with him? After confirming that Ning Kei had joined the devil, the hall was silent for a long time. But eventually, someone would express their stance, and that person's stance was very firm and strong. Aunt Cuny Maddie laughed as she coughed up blood. Her laughter was full of joy and madness. She looked at Ning Kei and shouted fiercely, "I want to see if Buddha will tolerate you." Ning Kei looked at Master Bushu quietly. He thought that the Xiankong Temple was indeed the legendary unknown place. The chief monk was indeed skillful to be able to use the Dharma to make the stone fall on his academy uniform. Then, he understood that this matter must have been planned by the high monk of the Xiankong Temple. Otherwise, no one would think of doing this in such a tense situation. Thinking of his teacher's advice, he shook his head. The headmaster had once told him that after youngest uncle cultivated the Great Spirit, he did not allow any enemy to touch his body. Therefore, even if all the cultivators in the world guessed that youngest uncle had joined the devil, no one dared to point it out. Ning Kei had hunted and chopped firewood since he was a child and had developed the habit of close combat. Therefore, it was easy for him to forget his teacher's advice. Moreover, he had become overconfident after entering the knowing destiny state. He did not expect the monks of the Xiankong Temple to have something on him. But, so what? The whole world knew that youngest uncle had joined the devil, but no one dared to mention it. Although he was not as strong as youngest uncle had been, he was stronger than him in some aspects. Why should he be afraid of these people? I don't believe in Buddha, so I don't have to worry about whether Buddha will tolerate me. Ning Ke looked at Cuny Madi and said, moreover, do you think I will join the devil just because you say so? There is no such logic in the world. Cuny Madi was slightly stunned. She did not expect that under such circumstances, this person could still talk about logic without batting an eyelid. She shouted angrily, everyone in the hall saw it. What they saw is true. The great divine priest of light had good eyesight, but he still made a mistake. And even if it is true, there is no even. I will not admit it. He looked into Cuny Madi's eyes and said mockingly, how can you prove it? Then, he turned to look at the rest of the people in the hall and asked, how can you prove it? He shook his head and said, if you want to prove it, then fight again. Maybe my leg will be pierced by your swords in the next moment. Who will pay for my medical expenses then? Master Bushu was silent for a moment and said, is this a threat? Ning Ke said, you can understand it this way. Cuny Madi shouted harshly, how can the academy have such a scoundrel like you? Ning Ke said, I am indeed good at being a scoundrel and can rank first in the academy. Even youngest uncle could not compare to me. So, don't do such meaningless things. The academy is still as arrogant as before. Master Bushu suddenly laughed and looked at him. I wonder what is more meaningful in the eyes of the headmaster and in the eyes of the academy. Master Qishan, who had been sitting silently on the futon, suddenly felt alarmed. He looked up at Bushu with a stern and warning look. Does the underworld invasion count? Bushu did not seem to feel Master Qishan's gaze at all. He looked at Ning Ke and the smile on his face gradually disappeared, leaving only dignity and solemnity. He shouted, does it count if you are the son of Yama? If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 582. There are many people in the world who have joined the devil. Do you think this is enough to make me, the president of Commandment Yard, leave Xiankong Temple? There is only one reason for me to leave Xiankong Temple. Master Bushu's Dharma idol was majestic. He looked at Ning Ke and shouted, I want to see if you are the son of Yama. You are cruel, and have joined the devil. If you are the son of Yama, even the headmaster will not protect you. Ning Ke stared at the monk's gem-like eyes and was silent for a long time. Last winter, he had announced his identity in front of the world in front of the Chang'an Palace. Even earlier, when the Tang military found out about his relationship with the general's mansion, there was a rumor in the world. The rumor said that the great divine priest of light had already seen that Ning Ke was the legendary son of Yama 16 years ago. Cuny Madi had also mentioned this before. Ning Ke had been nervous and confused because of this rumor, but gradually relaxed after the headmaster's explanation. Furthermore, with the academy behind him, no one dared to mention this rumor in front of him. Ning Ke did not care that Cuny Madi had mentioned it before, because he knew that it was the old nun's way of venting her anger and shame. It did not affect him at all. However, Master Bushu's words now made him a little fearful. Master Bushu came from Xiankong Temple and was not an ignorant child. He could not publicly accuse a disciple of the academy of being the son of Yama just based on rumors. It was undoubtedly the most serious accusation in the world. There was another important reason that made Ning Ke nervous. It was the warning sign he had felt when he saw the Buddhist chariot on Tile Mountain. Until now, he still did not know what the warning was referring to. Could it be this accusation? Is this the typical process of a righteous sect seeking a righteous cause for a personal grudge? Ning Ke looked at Master Bushu and said mockingly, I am very glad that the academy is one of the famous sects in the world. If I was really an ordinary cultivator, wouldn't I be framed to the point where not even a speck of dust would be left? Master Bushu said, I say that you are the son of Yama. Naturally, I have proof. Ning Ke said, I am very curious. What proof do you speak of? He could not be truly curious. Until today, he was still the first suspect in the world to be the son of Yama. The second suspect, Prince Longqing, had already disappeared into the wilderness. However, at this moment, he could not show any nervousness. Master Bushu looked at him quietly and took out a copper bell from his sleeve. The bell was of a common copper color, but its design was somewhat unique. It was round and broad, and looked more like a small bell. Master Qishan looked at the bell and his expression changed. He shouted, Bao Shu. Put that bell down. Obviously, Bao Shu had no respect for his uncle master today. He looked at Ning Ke indifferently and held the copper bell in his right hand. He said, this bell is called Yulan, also known as the cleansing bell. Looking at this copper bell, Cheng Zicheng remembered that his senior brother had once mentioned a certain Buddhist celestial device. His pupils shrank and he said in disbelief, is this the legendary Yulan bell? When Master Dongming saw the bell, he had already guessed it. When he heard the name of the bell, he was shocked and speechless. Kuni Mati was surprised and delighted. The autumn wind blew in from outside the hall and caressed the copper bell between his fingers, making a crisp sound. The sound of the bell was crisp, but there was absolutely no coldness in it. It sounded extremely gentle and compassionate. The moment the bell rang, Ning Ke remembered that a few days ago on the mountain road of Hua Mountain, the bell had sounded before the Buddhist chariot had arrived. At that time, the kingfishers had jumped to welcome it. It was an extraordinary scene. He frowned slightly, feeling that something troublesome was about to happen. Master Bushu held the copper bell between his fingers and said benevolently, the Yulan flower grows in the far west Pure Land and is the best at suppressing evil. The copper used to make this bell was nurtured in the Yulan flower field for tens of thousands of years and was the purest. It was then cast into a bell and cultivated with Buddha in the world for countless years. Ning Ke looked at the copper bell between Master Bushu's fingers and suddenly said, from your introduction and everyone's reaction, I can roughly guess that you are going to say that this copper bell can find the whereabouts of the son of Yama. Master Bushu said solemnly, that's right. Ning Ke shook his head and said, if this copper bell is really so useful, why would the West Hill Divine Palace kill so many people in order to find the son of Yama? Why would the great divine priest of light be imprisoned for more than a decade? Master Bushu said, that is because the son of Yama had just descended and had not yet awakened. Ning Ke asked, then how do you know that the son of Yama has awakened? Master Bushu said, the awakening of the son of Yama is a natural omen. Otherwise, why would the divine priest of light break out of Peach Mountain and go to Chang'an to find you? Ning Ke said, you are talking. Who knows if the bell in your hand is the legendary Yulan bell? Perhaps you picked it up in one of the meditation rooms in the temple. Return it quickly. Otherwise, when the old monk in the meditation room wakes up in the middle of the night and finds that the copper bell on his belt is gone, he will be scared to death. This was a joke that was extremely disrespectful to the Buddhism sect and blasphemous to the Lank temple. However, no one in the temple laughed. The expressions on everyone's faces became more and more complicated. Master Bushu looked at him and said, if it is just an ordinary copper bell, why don't you listen to it? Ning Ke said, why should I listen to it? Don't you think it looks stupid? Master Bushu said calmly, if the bell has no effect on you, then you are naturally not the son of Yama. When the time comes, the Xiankong temple will naturally clear your name. Ning Ke smiled and shook his head. He took out a handkerchief from his sleeve and looked at him seriously. This is the treasure of the academy, the Tian Luo handkerchief. It can subdue all evil in the world. Now, I suspect that the Buddha is the son of Yama. Do you want to dig out his ashes and let me fan him with this handkerchief? Master Bushu ignored his vicious mockery and said, I can let you try. Ning Ke shook his head and said, I do not suspect that you are the son of Yama. I suspect the Buddha. Master Bushu suddenly smiled and said, Mr. 13, you are afraid. It was not fear, but vigilance. It was the vigilance and uneasiness of the Buddhist chariot when he heard the bell on the mountain path. Ning Ke said to himself in his heart. Then, he had to admit that he was indeed afraid. The rumor that he was the son of Yama was his biggest fear. He glanced at Sang Sang. Master Bushu said in a low voice, You want to leave? Just as Ning Ke was about to retort, he suddenly heard a very tired and soft voice. Don't let the copper bell ring. He could tell that it was Master Qishan's voice and his body stiffened. Master Qishan sat on the futon with his body hunched. His dry lips moved slightly and his voice was only audible to Ning Quebec, even if you kill Bushu, don't let the copper bell ring. Ning Ke felt a chill. The bell must be extraordinary to make Master Qishan so nervous. Most importantly, he remembered the conversation he had with the master that night by the stream. So, the prerequisite to saving the world is to kill the son of Yama? There are other ways besides killing him. What ways? For example, let him cultivate in Buddhism and then be purified by light? Master, why do I feel like you are talking about me? Was he really the son of Yama? Ning Ke was still bickering with Bushu with a smile on his face, but there was no smile in his heart. It was cold and even a little dazed. He looked at Master Bushu and asked, Since you can determine who the son of Yama is by ringing the bell, why didn't you ring it for the past few days? Why did you wait until now to ring it? Master Bushu said, The bell is a Buddha's ritual implement. There are strict conditions to use it. The listener needs to be within a certain distance from the bell, and the listener needs to chant scriptures to clear their minds. Ning Ke said, Then you can't do anything to me as long as I stay away from the bell. Master Bushu said, If you don't dare to listen, it is also a form of proof. Besides, can you walk out of the Lank temple today? Ning Ke suddenly laughed and said, Is that so? I'd like to see who dares to stop me. After saying this, he put his hands behind his back, feeling very carefree and at ease. In fact, he was preparing to receive something. Sang Sang, who was blocked by his body, took off the arrow box and prepared to assemble the bow. Of course, in order to clear the suspicion of the academy, I am willing to listen. Ning Ke looked at Bushu and said with a smile, Master, please chant scriptures to clear your mind. I really want to know what is so strange about this bell. He was already prepared. In the next moment, Sang Sang handed the iron bow to him and shot at Bushu. Perhaps 1 or 2 arrows would not kill him. He would shoot all 13 iron arrows and then escape the Lank temple with Sang Sang, never to return. At this moment, Master Bushu seemed to have guessed what he was thinking. He smiled and said, Even though I did not practice silent meditation with Qi Nian, I know some ways of chanting in silence. Hearing this, Ning Ke's heart tightened. The so-called chanting in silence naturally meant that one did not need to chant scriptures to be effective. While he was multitasking, Master Bushu might have already silently read the scripture to open the bell in his heart. Ning Ke knew that he had to move. Before the iron bow was handed to him, he could only hold the hilt of his knife. With a flick of his wrist, the heavy padao with Haotian's divine light slashed at Master Bushu. At the same time, he stretched out his left index finger and drew a sharp line in the air in front of him. Master Bushu's expression did not change. He put his left hand together and a strong Buddhist aura formed a vague giant handprint in front of him. It grasped the terrifying knife momentum. The knife momentum was broken again, and the giant handprint disappeared. However, the small bronze bell in Master Bushu's right hand had already begun to shake gently. The crisp sound of a bell rang out in the hall. It was different from the bell that had rung on the mountain path. It was the same compassion, but it was not gentle. Instead, it was full of majesty, as if it could suppress all evil in the world. The bell rang out of the temple and throughout the entire Lank temple. There were 17 ancient bells in the Lank temple. They were either in the pavilions, behind the temple, under the corridors, or beside the plum trees. These 17 ancient bells rang almost at the same time. The deep and bright bell rang out between the eaves of the yellow temple. But it could not cover the crisp and indifferent bell. The bell rang again, and the bell gradually flew away. It flew all the way to the peak of Tile Mountain. The stone statue of Buddha was quiet in the clouds, and a solemn light of Buddha gradually appeared. Chapter 6 ends. I'm going to write some more and count it in the first update. I have many things to do today, and I'm so sleepy that I'm worried I won't be able to write. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 583. The tourists who attended the Yulon Hungry Ghost Festival went to the small town with the floats. Only a few stalls selling candy sticks were left. The ambassadors and the girls from the House of Red Sleeves were brought to the Wa Mountain by the monks to enjoy the scenery. The front temple had gradually returned to its peaceful appearance. The ordinary cultivation sects were still waiting for news from the rear temple in the middle temple. However, they did not care and naturally would not sit still in the temple. Instead, they walked around, entering the temple and worshipping the Buddhas when they saw them. Outside a slightly remote temple, the crown prince of the South Jin Kingdom climbed up from the ground with difficulty. He looked at the broken temple door with extreme fear in his eyes. He even subconsciously avoided Xia Qingyun's support. Xia Qingyun did not know what had happened in the temple. He once again reached out to help the crown prince up. He looked into the temple and said angrily, "Your Highness, who is so daring? I will send someone to capture him and interrogate him." The South Jin Kingdom was a powerful country in the world, and the crown prince was even more arrogant. He would not be at a disadvantage even when facing Ning Ke, a disciple of the academy, on the Wa Mountain. However, when he heard Xia Qingyun's words, his face instantly turned pale and he said repeatedly, "No, no. Leave this temple immediately." The light in the temple was relatively dim, and this side temple was no exception. If not for some light leaking in through the broken door, one would not have been able to see what was going on inside. There were also 2 stone statues in this temple. 2 people were looking at the 2 statues of the Venerable Ones. One was wearing a plain robe with a simple Taoist bun. He carried a wooden sword on his back. He was the world wayfarer of Haotian Taoism, Yi Su. The other was strong and wore a rarely seen animal skin robe in the Central Plains. He was the world wayfarer of the Devil's Doctrine, Tang. The crown prince of the South Jin Kingdom must have been thrown out of the temple by one of them. It was no wonder that the crown prince was so afraid facing such 2 powerful world wayfarer. Yi Su said, "You did not kill the crown prince of the South Jin Kingdom. So I will not attack you in the temple today." Tang's voice was a little low and humming. "I am not interested in killing. But aren't the royal families in the Central Plains dogs of the West Hill Divine Palace? Why would you care about a dog?" Yi Su said with a smile, "Haotian Taoism and the secular world are mutually reinforcing. You don't know that the Jishou Abbey has to support many people, and they are very picky. So we really need the royal family to help us earn money." Tang looked at him and said, "You are able to admit the decadence of Taoism. You speak more directly now, and you look more pleasing to the eye. But when did the wooden sword on your back have a scabbard?" Yi Su said, "When I was young, I always felt that there was no place in the world that I couldn't go and that there was no one I couldn't defeat. I was extremely proud, so how could I be willing to keep the Taoist sword in its sheath?" Now that I'm getting older, I've also understood some more truths. A sword in its sheath is still a sword. Even if it withdraws its edge, it doesn't necessarily lose its sharpness. Dun said, "It seems that your trip to Chang'an has been fruitful." Yi Su said, "You should also go to Chang'an and live for a while." Dun said, "I'll go if I have the chance." Yi Su turned to look at him and said, "You don't even dare to go to Chang'an. Why do you dare to come to Lank Temple?" Dun said, "In the past, you wanted to kill me every time you saw me. Why don't you do it today?" Yi Su said, "Because I only realized after coming to Lank Temple that the devil's doctrine has been destroyed after the Lotus sect massacred the ancient temple decades ago. Even if you are alive, you can't change anything." Dun said, "Do you think that today will be the same as that day decades ago?" Yi Su shook his head and said, "Back then, the Divine Lord Lotus and Mr. Ku were already invincible. Today, the two people in the temple may have unlimited potential, especially one of them. But after all, only Xiao He has shown his talent." Dun said, "Are you sure that the academy won't do anything?" Yi Su said, "This is a Buddhist temple. It's the mute who needs to worry about this, not us." Dun said, "So you don't go to the back temple, but stay here and stare at the statue of the Venerable?" Yi Su said, "It's the same for you." Dun said, "Because I respect the academy, so I don't want to stain my hands with blood." Yi Su said after a moment of silence, "It's because I still don't understand." Dun said, "There are also things that Taoism doesn't understand?" Yi Su said, "Even the Divine Lord of Light was not wrong back then, let alone me." Dun said, "I really want to know how far Ning Ke will go." Yi Su said, "He is an extremely realistic and selfish person. He won't have the courage to fight against the whole world." Dun shook his head and said, "You look more human now, but that's only because of the smoke from the houses in Chang'an. In fact, after breaking through the death door, you don't understand the thoughts of a normal person at all." Yi Su thought for a moment and nodded. "That makes sense." At this moment, a bell rang in the Lank Temple. It buzzed continuously and could be heard everywhere. Yi Su slowly closed his eyes and searched for the sound of the bell. "It's starting." He walked out of the side hall and walked to the back temple. Dun looked at the stone statue of the Venerable in front of him. After a moment of silence, he also left the hall. The cultivators in the middle temple were alarmed by the bell and walked out. They held the railings and looked toward the mountain. Yi Su and Dun walked through the crowd. No cultivators noticed them. No one would have thought that these two were the legendary world wayfarers. The bell rang incessantly along the way. The light of Buddha in the Lank Temple grew brighter. Countless auras of heaven and earth gathered and formed a barrier above the temple that could only be sensed but not seen. It contained supreme power. The wooden sword on Yi Su's back seemed to sense it and buzzed softly. Dun's right foot crushed a brick. Yi Su looked up at the sky and frowned slightly. He said, "The Buddhism sect has been silent for tens of thousands of years. I didn't expect them to hide such a powerful technique. My sword can pass through, but I can't." Dun looked down at the broken brick under his feet and said in a low voice, "I can try to pass through underground." The two came to the back temple of the Lank Temple. Looking at the tightly shut black door in front of him and feeling the changes in the hall, Yi Su's expression suddenly became extremely shocked. He said with mixed emotions, "My master sensed it in the South Sea, so he asked me to come back from the north to take a look." However, he probably didn't expect this to be the truth. In the back hall of the Lank Temple. When the bell rang, Ning Ke's finger had yet to draw the complete line in the air, so he didn't continue. Instead, he guarded his sense of perception and stood where he was, ready to resist Buddha's power. The Yulan bell was indeed a ritual implement that Buddha always carried with him. Accompanied by the clear sound, a benevolent and majestic Buddha's nature entered his ears and silently entered his sense of perception. In an instant, countless illusions appeared in Ning Kei's mind. Those indescribably filthy and ugly devil bodies and those indescribably charming heavenly ladies kept shuttling back and forth, sometimes near and sometimes far away. They exuded all kinds of temptations and fears, leading him to the Pure Land or the underworld. Ning Kei's sense of perception was violently torn and he was in great pain. However, his sense of perception still had fragments of Master Lotus consciousness, so he woke up from the illusion in a very short time. After confirming that Buddha's Yulan bell was not as powerful as he had imagined, and that he could even survive it without entering the knowing destiny state, he decided to resolve this matter as quickly as possible. The Yulan bell did not affect him. He looked at Master Bushu in front of him, ready to fight him to the death. However, the look in Master Bushu's eyes was very strange. Bushu looked at Ning Kei in a daze. He looked a little frightened, but more confused. The rest of the people in the hall also had strange looks in their eyes. They looked at him as if they had seen a ghost. They were shocked, frightened, and confused. Ning Kei looked down at his body and found nothing strange. What was more disturbing was that the grease and dust on the surface of the big black umbrella, which had not been washed away by the rain for more than 10 years, were becoming thinner under the washing of the Buddha's light, as if they would eventually be eroded into nothingness. Because of the shock, Master Bushu had already stopped playing the Yulan bell between his fingers. The bell in the Lank temple was still ringing, but the crisp sound of the bell gradually disappeared. Ning Kei carried her on his back. Sang Sang lowered her head and leaned on his shoulder. Her face was pale and her body was weak, but she habitually reached out to hold the umbrella for him, just like when he carried her on his back in the cold rain many years ago. Ning Kei did not want her to hold the umbrella, for he knew that she was in a very bad situation. Sang Sang still took the big black umbrella. Amazingly, when the big black umbrella was in her hands, it suddenly became much more stable than before, as if it could withstand more Buddha's light. Ning Kei walked out of the Buddha's light with Sang Sang on his back. He held the padao horizontally in front of his chest and the iron bow and arrow box on his back. He looked at the people in the hall expressionlessly and did not speak. His eyes were cold and fierce, as dangerous as a tigress protecting her cubs. The people in the hall were all powerhouses, but when they looked at his eyes, they subconsciously did not want to make eye contact with him. Then, they discovered something amazing, so they calmed down a little. Ning Kei walked out of the Buddha's light, but he could not walk out of it. The Buddha's light that descended from the peak of Hua Mountain seemed to be able to sense his position. More accurately, it could sense the position of Sang Sang, who was holding the big black umbrella, and moved with his footsteps. Ning Kei looked at the fragments of the Buddha's light that fell from the edge of the big black umbrella into the air and then disappeared. He was silent. Ha 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 ha, Lu Qinjia woke up from her shock. Looking at Ning Kei under the umbrella, she could not help but laugh out loud. She laughed so hard that she could not catch her breath. Tears streamed down her face, and she looked extremely crazy. The most important person to you has become the daughter of Yama. Ning Kei, what can you do now? You can probably understand what I have been feeling these days. Ning Kei looked at her expressionlessly. There was some pity and extreme contempt in his eyes. The laughter gradually stopped. Lu Qinjia was confused and silent. Her face was pale, and the wound was still bleeding. However, she understood the meaning of Ning Kei's look of pity and contempt. She could not help but be confused. So that was what he said and did. But why did he not think about it? That was the daughter of Yama, Mr. 13, please put her down. Master Bushu had a compassionate look on his face as he chanted the name of Buddha and looked at Ning Quebec Cheng Zicheng sat at the entrance of the hall with his head lowered. His sword was unsheathed and placed across his knees. Ning Ke looked at the little bell between Master Bushu's fingers. He looked at the sword on Cheng Zicheng's knees. Then he looked up at the big black umbrella. Master Bushu was the chief monk of the Xiankong temple. He was a person of great enlightenment, and his state was equivalent to the knowing destiny state, or even higher. The bell in his hand was a relic of Buddha. It carried the purest Buddha nature and was the bane of Sangsang. Cheng Zicheng was the younger brother of the sage of sword, Liu Bai. He was a powerhouse in the knowing destiny state. Even though he had not shown himself these days, the thin sword on his knees had the power to split a lake and cut a mountain. The big black umbrella was the most powerful in Sangsang's hands, just like it had been for the past decade. However, under the washing of the supreme light of Buddha, the grease on the surface of the umbrella continued to disappear. One could already feel the merciful coldness of the light of Buddha through the smallest cracks on the surface of the umbrella. Ning Ke did not have the confidence to escape from the two powerhouses of the Xiankong temple and the sword garret even if he did not carry Sangsang on his back. Furthermore, he was carrying Sangsang now, so the light of Buddha would follow them and suppress them. Since we have found the daughter of Yama, no one in the world will let her escape. Even if you escape to the deepest part of the wilderness or into the stormy sea, you will still not be able to escape from the light of Buddha. Master Bushu's fingers that were holding the bronze bell tightened slightly. He looked at Ning Ke and said, "Give up." At this moment, Master Qishan said sadly, "Since they can't leave, don't ring the bell." Ning Ke looked at the master in silence. His right hand left the hilt and patted the scabbard that was sticking out from his waist. People thought that his silence represented a fierce psychological struggle, and they all had different expressions. Cheng Zicheng sighed and thought to himself, even if they are your birth parents, they are the daughter of Yama. What other choice do you have? Only Master Qishan vaguely knew what Ning Ke was thinking. Ning Ke looked at Master Qishan and found that although the master looked sad, he was not shocked. He was sure that the master had known that Sangsang was the daughter of Yama a long time ago. When he was in Chang'an, he felt a little uneasy when he thought about going to the Lank temple. Now that he looked back, he realized that Sangsang's illness, the 3 games of chess in Hua Mountain, and his cultivation of Buddhism in the temple all pointed to the truth. The Lank temple was his and Sangsang's doom. Then, he thought of something even further and could not help but feel a chill. It was the headmaster's idea to come to the Lank temple to treat Sangsang. Specifically, it was the arrangement that eldest brother had written to Master Qishan. It can't be like this. Ning Ke said to himself silently. He wanted to drive the most unacceptable inference out of his mind. However, he needed the truest answer, even if it would be extremely painful. So he looked at the master in silence. Master Qishan knew what he wanted to hear and said, "Do you now believe that she is the daughter of Yama?" Ning Ke said without any emotion, "You used to say that she is the daughter of light, and now you say that she is the daughter of Yama. How do I know which one to believe? I only know that I picked her up and fed her mouthful after mouthful of porridge. If she really is someone's daughter, it can only be my daughter." Master Qishan said with pity, "But this is the truth. A few days ago in the cave, you asked me to treat her. When my hand fell on her wrist, I felt the cold aura and knew, that was the brand that Yama left on her. Have you never thought that the cold aura that even the headmaster and the West Hill divine skills could not drive away could not be a normal illness caused by a weak childhood cold?" Ning Ke had long suspected the strange cold aura in Sangsang's body. However, he did not say it or think about it so that he could forget it. Now that the master pointed it out, he said after a moment of silence, "It is still just a guess. There is no way to be sure. Teacher said that there is no omniscient person in the world." "Yes. That is why the headmaster asked you to come to the Lank temple. The first thing is to determine the illness in her body. Only then can we know the truth and find a way to cure it." Master Qishan sighed and said, "This year's 3 games of chess on the Hua Mountain were actually prepared for Sang Sang. At the Jumping Tiger Stream, no matter how tough you were, would still find a way for her to solve the game." "Why?" Ning Ke asked. "To prove who she is." Master Qishan said, "The way she solved the chaotic Ku game was the method of heaven's calculation. It is not a level that can be achieved by humans. So the first game proved that she is not a human." Ning Ke was silent. Master Qishan continued, "In the Autumn Pavilion, she played the second game with Dongming, and her first choice was the black chess piece. Dongming was best at observing the celestial phenomena in chess. In the end, it was hard to tell who would win or lose, just like light and darkness confronting each other in the sky. It was also a sign of the daughter of Yama's identity." Ning Ke said, "Master Dongming said at that time that the separation of black and white was determined by the mind." Master Qishan looked at Sang Sang on Ning Ke's back and said lovingly, "The will of heaven depends on her mind." There are 4 chapters today. This is the first chapter. The next chapter must be finished before midnight. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 585. Master Dongming had been sitting in the corner of the hall since the beginning. When he heard himself being mentioned, he chanted the name of Buddha and then fell silent. It seemed that he had already known the truth about Sang Sang's origin. Master Qishan's eyes left Sang Sang's face and looked at Ning Quebec. He said, "You participated in the 3rd game. Although you were late, you should know what had happened. Although the rules of the world inside and outside the chessboard are different, they are still within the rules of Haotian. Sang Sang broke the eternal rule above time, death. You should know that in the world of Haotian, only Haotian himself can make or surpass the eternal rule. If a person who can break the eternal rule is not Haotian, then she must not be from this world. She must even come from the underworld of eternal silence and endless pain." The real 3 games of chess on Hua Mountain was one of the many tricks that Buddha prepared before he left this world. It was also the most important trick. It was used to find the trace of the son of Yama, just like the Yulan bell. Junior brother Lotus had also solved the puzzle in the past, but his situation was different from Sang Sang's. Because the method or path he chose was different, Sang Sang's extraordinary calculation power, her mind, and her disregard for the rules revealed the shocking truth step by step. Master Qishan sighed and finally said, "She is the daughter of Yama." Ning Ke said, "Whether it was Buddha in the past, Xiankong Temple, Lank Temple, or White Tower Temple in Yueluan, all these things are said by you monks. But this is the world of Haotian. If Sang Sang is the daughter of Yama, why didn't Taoism find anything and still call her the daughter of light? I can't figure it out, so you still can't convince me." Master Qishan said, "Since the projection was in the world of Haotian, Yama naturally prepared many tricks for his children. Haotian Taoism was the first to bear the brunt, so we Buddhism and the Academy didn't see it as clearly." Ning Ke understood the meaning of this sentence, and he even knew Sang Sang's identity. But he still didn't want to admit it, because he knew that if he admitted it verbally, it would bring a lot of inconvenience to his actions. "I need more evidence," he said. Master Qishan sighed and said, "That day in front of this hall, I once said that the most interesting thing about you is that you can do what you want. If you don't want to, you can do what you can't think of. This is not Zen, but a real Sai. You have lived with Sang Sang since you were young. If you really think about it, how can you not understand?" Ning Ke did not speak. Master Qishan pointed at the big black umbrella in the light of Buddha and said, "This black umbrella can isolate and conduct everything, including light. It is not something that should exist in the human world. Many years ago, when you got this big black umbrella, didn't you find it strange? Didn't you have any doubts? The process of Ning Kai picking up the big black umbrella was too ordinary. If Sang Sang had not cried, he would have thrown it away. However, as time went by, the big black umbrella gradually showed many incredible characteristics. This seemingly inconspicuous big black umbrella was impervious to fire and water, and also as pure as Sang Sang. It could conduct and even amplify the psyche power and even Haotian's divine flame of the umbrella holder. In the classics and legends of the cultivation world, there had never been such an all-around defensive weapon. It was even more magical than Baoshu's Yulan Bell. At the entrance of Northern Mountain Road, during the night when he killed the sword master Yen Suqing, during the battle with Xiaofan at the lake in winter, and even earlier at the Shubi Lake in Min Mountain, he would have died many times without this big black umbrella. At this time, Ning Kai certainly understood that the big black umbrella was a weapon given to Sang Sang by Yama. Then the black umbrella somehow recognized that Ning Kai was Sang Sang's protector and began to protect him. Several years ago in the spring, on the first day he officially became an ordinary student of the academy, he met a scholar. The scholar had a wooden dipper tied to his waist and a scroll in his hand. The scholar wanted to exchange the wooden dipper for the big black umbrella on Ning Kai's back. Ning Kai did not want to exchange the big black umbrella on his back for the wooden dipper on his waist. The scholar did not say anything. He walked to the side door of the academy, boarded an ox cart, and left the academy. Later, Ning Kai found out that the scholar was the eldest brother of the academy. At that time, the headmaster of the academy was sitting in the ox cart. That was the last thing the headmaster of the academy did before he traveled around the countries again. It was not until now in the Lank Temple that he truly understood what he had missed when he refused the exchange back then. But it seemed that everything was a little too late. Note, for more details, see Chapter 79 and Chapter 80 of the first volume, The Empire in the Morning. What is the big black umbrella? It is a piece of night. Master Qishan's answer was very mysterious and difficult to understand, but Ning Kai understood. Master Qishan looked at Ning Kai and said, 16 years ago, the three heavenly wayfarers of the Buddhism, Taoism and Devil's doctrine gathered in the wilderness. I heard that Mr. First also went there for the sign of the arrival of the son of Yama. It was also on that day that Sang Sang was born in the official of council's mansion. It was also on that day that Ning Kai escaped into the woodshed of the official of council's mansion and held the hatchet. However, at that time, he did not know what the newborn girl meant to him. Ning Kai thought of today in the Lank Temple. He had told Cheng Lixue and Cuni Madi twice that the great divine priest of light could also make mistakes. Only then did he realize that everything was really just a mistake, when the current wife of the Grand Secretary, the concubine of the official of council's mansion, was pregnant with Sang Sang. The formidable great divine priest of light saw the shadow of the night earlier than anyone else in the world. So his eyes fell on Chang and city and fell on an alley. The great divine priest of light did not see Sang Sang because Sang Sang could not be seen at that time. He saw a little boy in the general's mansion. He saw a person who was born with knowledge. So he thought he saw the son of Yama. Sang Sang leaned on Ning Kai's shoulder and listened to the conversation. Her face became paler and paler because she remembered and understood many things. She remembered that day, an old man in a dirty cotton-padded jacket walked into the old brush pen shop. The old man said to her, "Do you believe in lucky chances?" She also remembered that before the old man died, he looked back at her sitting under the tree. He seemed very hesitant and struggled. It was not until the end that he understood. He smiled and said, "So you are my lucky chance. She is the daughter of Yama. She is waking up and the eyes of Yama are about to fall on her. So you will think that she will die because you and she are people from two different worlds. The 3 games of chess on Wa Mountain are for her to play, but also for you to see. The first game requires the white chess piece to give up. The second game is to let you understand the opposition between light and shadow. The third game is to let you see the scene of the world's destruction. All of these are to let you learn to give up. Unfortunately, the first two games are meaningless to you. In the third game, the world that is about to be destroyed cannot change your mind. Then what about the real world? Master Xiaofan looked into Ning Kei's eyes and sighed. If the world we live in is about to be destroyed because of the little girl on your back, what will you choose? Note, for more details, see Chapter 103 of Volume 2, New Urn, Old Urn, Ashes as Snow. Well, my behavior is really asking for a beating. But I am really afraid that some readers have forgotten that the contents of these chapters and the previous plots are really good to read. Well, why don't you read Jaya again? The next chapter is before 2:00. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 586. Ning Kei had always known that Sang Sang was special. But he also knew that he was special. He came from another world and was undoubtedly special in this world. That was why he had always thought that Sang Sang's uniqueness came from his uniqueness, because she was his natal. But he had never thought that Sang Sang was the special one. When did eldest senior brother find out about this? Was it a long time ago? Ning Kei looked at Master Xiaofan and asked. He had already guessed the answer, but he wanted to confirm it again because this matter was very important to him, second only to the danger of Sang Sang's identity. Master Xiaofan said, I'm not sure, but Mr. First had made it very clear in his letter. The headmaster asked you to come to Lank Temple to see if the Buddhism sect had a way to remove the cold aura in her body. It was because the academy knew that the Buddhism sect had a way to deal with the imprint of Yama. So the headmaster already knew about it. Ning Kei said in a self-deprecating manner. Until now, there were many things that he could not figure out. When they returned from the wilderness, eldest brother, contrary to his usual gentle and kind temperament, insisted on opposing Ning Kei and Sang Sang's relationship. Perhaps he had vaguely guessed Sang Sang's true identity. But the headmaster agreed to marry Sang Sang. After saying this, he suddenly understood something. Therefore, the emotion that he treasured the most and the most precious returned to his body. That emotion was called trust. So he raised his head and his eyes became unusually bright and sharp. He looked at the people in the temple and began to slowly pat the scabbard rhythmically, full of confidence that came from nowhere. The scabbard of the padao was very hard and thick. When he patted it, the sound was very dull and could not be very loud. Even though the temple was very quiet, it was difficult to attract attention. But there were always people in this world, or horses with especially good hearing. The big black horse, who had been chewing on grass and spitting on plums in the garden behind Lank Temple, became alert after the bell rang and the light of Buddha descended. It kept staring in the direction of the temple. It had already heard Ning Kei when he first patted the scabbard. That was the agreement between it and Ning Quebec. However, it could feel the power contained in the light of Buddha and knew that there were many powerful humans in the temple, so it hesitated for a long time. The sound of Ning Kei patting the scabbard for the second time could be heard. The big black horse grinned, revealing a mouthful of white teeth. It made up its mind, lowered its head and left the hall without a sound, running towards the Zen temple. The big black horse ran into the Zen temple and came to the side of the black horse carriage. It lowered its body skillfully and put its head into the carriage. Then it opened its mouth and bit the leather rope tightly. With a sudden kick of its hind hooves, it leaped forward. The big black horse had used twice the strength he usually used to pull the carriage. He thought that the carriage would gallop along with him, but the carriage did not move at all. Only then did it realize that without Ning Ke, the talisman array on the carriage could not be activated at all. This carriage made of stainless steel must be extremely heavy. Fortunately, or perhaps unfortunately, the big black horse had many experiences in pulling the carriage when the talisman array was not activated when it was in Chang'an. It breathed heavily helplessly, its muscles bulging and its hooves trembling. It dragged the heavy black carriage out of the Zen temple and towards the Buddha hall. The stainless steel wheels left marks on the bluestone on the ground behind the Lank temple. Fortunately, it did not make too much noise. As the big black horse pulled the carriage with all its strength, it thought with some fear that it was not the right time to go to the Buddha hall. It did not know that the inconspicuous mistress had such a powerful background. If it was killed with that idiot Ning Ke, would there be any benefits when it reached the underworld? Master Bushu looked at Ning Ke and said, "As long as you are willing to leave the daughter of Yama and let the Xiankong temple handle it, you can leave on your own. The academy will receive the most sincere gratitude and respect from the Buddhism sect." Ning Ke did not answer his request. After a moment of silence, Master Bushu said, "Although Daosher is my son, if you are willing to think of the people in the world, then I can ignore this feud." Upon hearing this, Kuni Mati's body trembled slightly. She looked at Bushu with hatred, but did not dare to speak. At the door of the hall, Cheng Zicheng looked at Ning Ke and said, "Mr. 13, no one dares to disrespect the academy. But since it has been confirmed that she is the daughter of Yama, then the Sword Garret or any other cultivation sect will not allow you to take her away. Please understand this." Other than asking Master Chishan, Ning Ke remained silent the rest of the time. The people in the hall thought that he still could not accept the fact that Sang Sang was the daughter of Yama, so they were waiting for him to wake up. Looking at his expression, they guessed that he was already sure and must be struggling in his heart. They sympathized with him and hoped for a peaceful solution, so they began to persuade him. To them, no matter what choice Ning Ke would make, it would be a long and painful process. However, the development of things was completely different from what they had imagined. "You see, I have said many times on the journey that you will not die." Ning Ke turned to look at Sang Sang's little face and said, "If you are the daughter of Yama, how can you die? If you die, you will just go home." There is no need to say so many last words. Now that I think of the scene, it is really funny. It is good that you are confirmed that the cold aura will not kill you. He did not know before because he did not want to know. Now that he knew that his little handmaiden, who was now his wife, could destroy the whole world, he just knew it. I said that Buddha will not tolerate you. Buddha will not allow the daughter of Yama to live in this world. How long do you think you can last under the light of Buddha? Kuni Mati looked at him and shouted, "Ning Ke, don't think that I don't know that you are stalling for time and waiting for the academy to save you. No matter how arrogant the academy is, do you dare to protect the daughter of Yama? Just give up and think about why the academy wants you to come to the Lank temple for treatment. What does this have to do with the academy?" Ning Ke held the hilt of the padao again and said, "When I was young, I was not a student of the academy, but I still carried her over so many mountains and killed so many people and beasts who wanted to kill us. Now she has grown up and I have become so strong. Am I not as strong as I used to be?" Hearing these words, everyone's heart instantly became alarmed, and a chill gradually arose in their hearts. In the Buddhist hall at the back of the temple, there was a person who had been silent. Today, the situation had changed so many times that no one noticed her silence. However, at this moment, she looked up at Ning Quebec. Mo Shanshan did not say a word today, but the expression on her face changed several times. At the beginning, when Ning Ke defeated Kuni Mati and the flower addict, and was evenly matched with Master Bushu, she smiled happily. When Sang Sang's identity was revealed, she was shocked and confused. She did not know what to do. Ning Ke did not look at her, but he knew that she was looking at him. So he shook his head firmly and unquestionably. He knew that Mo Shanshan definitely knew what he meant. 2 years ago, they had fought side by side in the wilderness and had developed enough tacit understanding. However, he did not want her to choose a side, even if it was beneficial to him. The underworld invasion was too big, so big that even the academy could not bear it. Moreover, she was just a calligraphy addict who had just entered the knowing destiny state. Ning Ke hoped that she could have the freedom not to choose. For the sake of the world, for the sake of the continued existence of the world, I humbly beg you to hand the daughter of Yama to the Xiankong temple. Other than this, I can agree to any other request of yours. Master Bushu looked at Ning Ke and said. Ning Ke looked at him coldly and said, "If I want you to die, will you do it?" Master Bushu said calmly, "If I can save the world, of course I will." Ning Ke did not know what to say to this answer. Kuni Mati looked at Ning Ke's expression and knew that the more the people in the hall were willing to pay, the more pain he would suffer. She said in a hoarse voice, "If you are willing to hand over the daughter of Yama, I am also willing to die." Ning Ke said calmly, "Your life is worthless." Kuni Mati was furious. Then, Ning Ke looked at Master Bushu and said, "If it is for the sake of the world, what does it have to do with me? I am not a Buddhist cultivator. If it is for the sake of righteousness, what does righteousness have to do with me? I am not a Taoist priest, I am just an ordinary student in the academy. All I want to do is to take my wife away." Master Bushu said, "But no one can resist the rules of Haotian. Being unable to resist does not mean that we do not want to resist. In fact, in this world full of rules, I, you and everyone else are resisting the rules all the time." Ning Ke looked at the crowd and said, "When we are sick, we will take medicine to resist illness. We will eat ginseng to maintain our health and resist aging. We will cultivate to resist death. Some will commit suicide to resist life. You are the president of the commandment yard, but you have an illegitimate son. The preaching monk also has an illegitimate son named Wudao. I heard that Master Qishan is the illegitimate son of the previous chief preaching monk. I do not want to say that you are all thieves, prostitutes, monks and nuns, but in fact, you are all resisting the Buddha's commandments or moral restraints." Master Bushu and Kuni Mati's expressions turned especially ugly. Master Qishan, however, shook his head and laughed, as if he liked hearing someone belittle the Xiankong temple to such an extent. "Of course, you want to kill Sang Sang. That is also a form of resistance." Ning Ke looked at Sang Sang and said, "But I do not want her to die." "Then you must allow me to resist your resistance. Do you really want to protect the daughter of Yama?" Master Bushu's expression turned grave and solemn. He said, "But you must know that she cannot survive in this world. The academy did not ask you to bring her to Lank to cure her." Ning Ke shook his head and said, "Teacher and eldest brother asked us to cure her." Master Bushu said sternly, "If she dies, the illness will naturally disappear." Ning Ke said, "If it was someone else, I might really suspect that he asked me to bring Sang Sang to Lank to cure her illness in order to cooperate with your Buddha's conspiracy. But I believe in eldest brother." Kuni Mati could not understand his confidence at this moment. She asked angrily, "Why?" Ning Ke said, "Because he is eldest brother." Corrected an important typo. Chapter 4 is still before 4 o'clock. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. After a moment of silence, Master Bushu said, "Even though this is a ritual implement left behind by Buddha, I still believe that it cannot be hidden from Yama's eyes. Uncle Master, you have underestimated the existence above the mortal world. Underestimating the Nether King. How foolish would that be? Master Qishan turned over the chessboard in front of him and said calmly, "What I want Sang Sang to hide from is not the eye of Yama, but time." "Time?" Ning Ke asked. "That's right, it is time." Master Qishan looked at the crowd and said, "You should have heard of the legend of the Lank Temple. However, no one would believe the legend to be true. Even you, Ning Ke, would subconsciously forget it. This chessboard left behind by Buddha can change the speed of the flow of time. The front side slows it down, and the back side speeds it up. If one enters the chessboard from the back side, it will only take a moment for several years to pass in the human world." Master Qishan said, "Turning 2 years into an instant means that during these 2 years, Sang Sang will disappear from the world. How will Yama find her?" Hearing this, everyone in the hall was shocked speechless. How could they have imagined that someone could come up with such a plan? What shocked them even more was that this person wasn't afraid of the arrival of the daughter of the King of Hell. Instead, he wanted to fight against the King of Hell. What kind of confidence was this? Master Bushu continued, "This method seems to make sense, but no one has ever used it before, so it is still very risky. However, since the daughter of Yama has arrived, we have to use it. The only method is the best method." Ning Ke thought of this famous saying from the academy. He understood who could think of such a whimsical method, and who dared to fight with Yama for Sang Sang. He could not help but feel his eyes moisten. Master Qishan looked at Ning Ke and said, "The headmaster of the academy thought of this method, and Mr. First and I decided to try it. However, since it is of great importance, we did not mention it to anyone, including you and Sang Sang. I will not tell you before entering the chessboard, because this is the only way to ensure safety." Ning Ke understood and said, "Because if the world knew that Sang Sang is the daughter of Yama, they would not think of a solution like you and the headmaster of the academy. They would only think of killing her." "That's right." Master Qishan looked at Master Bushu and sighed with melancholy. However, who would have thought that someone would leave the Xiankong temple with the jingling bell, resulting in the current situation? Bushu knew what he meant and said, "Uncle, I came to the Xiankong temple under orders." Upon hearing his answer, the wrinkles on Master Qishan's face deepened. He subconsciously looked out of the hall and at the white walls and yellow temples along the slope of the mountain. His face was filled with worry. Kuni Mati suddenly said sternly, "Who can guarantee that a method that has never been used before will work? The headmaster of the academy is gambling with Yama. He is so bold and confident, but the wager is the safety of the entire world. Why should the world gamble with him?" Master Qishan was silent. It was obvious that before he decided to cure Sang Sang, he had already predicted what kind of questions and censure he would face if the world knew about this. Master Bushu chanted the name of Buddha and said sternly, "All living beings are equal. The headmaster of the academy is just one of them. What right does he have to make all living beings risk their lives with him? The daughter of Yama must die." Master Qishan said, "All living beings are equal. Sang Sang is also one of them. She has done nothing wrong, so why should she die?" Master Bushu said, "She is the daughter of Yama, and that is the original sin. Even if she practices Buddhism and does good all her life, once she wakes up, she will be committing a crime against the entire world." Ning Ke looked up at the big black umbrella again. The grease and dirt on the outside of the umbrella had been gradually eroded away by the light of Buddha, revealing the pure black cloth. A ray of light of Buddha shone through the gap of the umbrella and landed on Sang Sang's shoulder. Sang Sang seemed to have been stabbed by a knife. Her face turned pale, but she bit her lips and did not make a sound. However, Ning Ke carried her on his back and felt her body suddenly stiffen. How could he not know how much pain she was in? The big black umbrella had become thinner and thinner, and it was about to collapse. Ning Ke needed it to hold on for a while longer, but eldest brother had not arrived yet. He looked at Master Qishan and said, it seems that we will never have the chance to learn Buddhism from you in this lifetime. There is no way to cure this illness. Just as you expected, the world has always lacked true compassion. Then he looked at Sang Sang and asked, "Can you still hold on? Can you still hold the big black umbrella? Can you still hold it?" Sang Sang weakly replied with a hum. Master Qishan sighed and said, "But no matter how big the world is, there is no place for you." "Where are you going?" Ning Ke said, "I want to go back to the academy." The master said, "Of course the academy will take you in, but what about her? Before your identity as the daughter of Yama was exposed, the academy loved you and could treat her secretly. But what about now?" Ning Ke was silent. He did not know what to do. He could not bring disaster to the academy. Master Bushu said, "The problem now is that you can no longer leave." As soon as he finished speaking, there was a flurry of footsteps outside the hall. The door of the back temple of the Lank Temple opened. The cultivators who had sensed something strange were blocked outside by the monks, but 68 yellow-robed monks entered in a line. It disappeared from Master Bushu's fingers and appeared in front of the iron arrow in the next moment. The Yulan bell left behind by Buddha was indeed mysterious beyond the level of the current cultivation world. The iron arrow accurately and coldly hit the bronze bell. However, it did not leave any mark on the bell. No matter how powerful the primordial 13 arrows were, they were still the crystallization of the wisdom of the disciples in the back of the mountain of the academy. At least for now, they could not be compared to the holy relic left behind by Buddha. There was another important reason why the iron arrow could not leave a mark on the bronze bell. The arrowhead of the iron arrow was not sharp, but a small round iron cylinder. Due to the strong impact, the small cylinder compressed violently and then exploded. There was a loud bang. Countless pieces of sharp iron shards shot out, making a terrifying sound as they shot towards Master Bushu. The bronze bell had blocked the iron arrow, and Bushu's Dhyana heart was greatly shaken and in pain. At this critical moment, he was indeed a high monk from the Xiankong temple. In a very short time, he recited 9 Vajra Sutras in his heart and laid 9 layers of Buddhist mantra aura in front of him. Most of the iron shards were blocked, but some managed to hit Bushu before the Buddhist mantra aura was laid out. In an instant, his body was drenched in blood. Ning Ke's reaction speed in battle was unparalleled. Almost at the same time he released the arrow, he confirmed that the primordial 13 arrows would not be able to break through the bronze bell's defense in a short time. He put away his bow and raised his blade. It seemed that he did not even have time to think. His body suddenly rushed forward, following the iron arrow. The Great Spirit had already covered his entire body. Every muscle was as hard as a rock, and every step he took left a hole in the green stone floor of the temple, sending stone shards flying. This was the first time Ning Ke had unreservedly displayed all his power after being possessed by the devil. He had used his body to the extreme, and suddenly possessed an unimaginably terrifying speed. When he rushed in front of Master Bushu, he could even feel the lingering smell of the iron arrow exploding. He chopped down on Bushu's face with the momentum of a mad tiger, and the light on the blade was like the blazing sun. Master Bushu closed his eyes tightly and reached out to recall the bronze bell. There was a sizzling sound. The blade of the padao fell on the air around Master Bushu like cutting paper, continuously tearing it apart. In an instant, it had cut through 6 layers of the Buddhist mantra aura of Bushu. Bushu spat out a mouthful of blood and fell to the ground. He slapped the ground with his palm and sat up straight again. He rang the bronze bell. The crisp sound of the bell rang again, and the 17 ancient bells in the Lank Temple rang again. The Buddha statue on top of Tile Mountain shone brightly, penetrating the mountain wind and forest, falling into the temple at the foot of the mountain and onto the big black umbrella. It was even thicker than before. Under the big black umbrella, Sang Sang's face became even paler. She spat out another mouthful of blood and leaned weakly on Ning Kei's back, as if she could die at any moment. However, her hand was still tightly gripping the handle of the umbrella. Master Bushu's cultivation state was extremely high, and he had long understood the various Buddhist dharma. When faced with Ning Kei's desperate attack, he could have chosen to use the bronze bell as a weapon and fight for a while. Even if he had lost the initiative and could not turn the tables, he would not have been in such a dangerous situation. However, there was only one thing on his mind now. He did not want to do anything that might give Ning Kei a chance to take Sang Sang away. He had to ensure that Sang Sang died on the spot. For this purpose, he did not hesitate to sacrifice himself. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 588. You all know, from Vermilion Bird to Qing Yu's Year, and then to The Spy, whenever I write about the latter half of the story, when the big pit starts to appear, I always like to write, see here for more details on the number of volumes and chapters. I've said before that when I was young, it was a bad habit that I developed from reading Liang Yusheng's see here for more details on my humble work XXX. Many of my friends had already guessed Sang Sang's true identity yesterday, but I still had goosebumps when I wrote it. It wasn't because I was happy that she was abused, but because I had finally finished something. Just like all the previous stories, it was something I had been preparing for more than a year. It felt perfect, like I had been in love for many years and finally got married. I started digging for Sang Sang's identity from the first chapter until now. I don't know how many times I dug in between. This is something I like to do. There are still some big holes in the story. I like to dig holes the most. Fortunately, I have the best character, and I will fill in every hole. This is the spiritual enjoyment I pursue. Moreover, the story of Falling Night is long, and there are many clues. Every time I think about it, I feel that being a storyteller is a wonderful thing. It's just a story of a few million words. It's really hard to dig out and tie in the plot. The effort and energy spent on this is enough for Long Qing to make 2 cauldrons of earth-sitting pills. Then I apologize to everyone. Recently, there have been too many single chapters soliciting votes. I apologize not for the fact that there are too many single chapters, but because I'm used to unbanning single chapters. Many readers who didn't have time to read my single chapters expressed their dissatisfaction. This sentence is so F***king annoying. Seriously speaking, the main problem is that after the ban is lifted, the readers using the client will experience interruption when reading. For example, they won't be able to see this chapter. I know that this is very annoying, and I apologize to everyone. I will ask if there is any way to solve this problem. It's very simple for me to solve it myself. I just don't open a single chapter. But I definitely can't do it in the next 2 months, because I'm really hungry. I crave every single monthly vote in your hands. I said the day before yesterday that since I want to fight for first place, I have to bring out the quantity and quality worthy of first place. I think I've done it. Of course, as writers, we can only compare ourselves. Earlier, I said that there is basically no foreshadowing after Falling Night. It's all big plots and all kinds of climaxes. I'm very excited, and I'm also very confident. Except for typos and omissions. The leader promised to help me edit the last 100 chapters. I firmly believe that the quality and quantity of my plots are worthy of everyone's votes. Now, he was only a few dozen votes away from first place. Comrade Blood Red was rapidly closing in from behind. I implore everyone to throw in the guaranteed monthly votes in your hands and smash it into first place. I don't know how many votes you can cast today, so I can't write it in the title. Please refer to the monthly votes for more details. Otherwise, that would be too awesome. But no matter how much it was love. To put it in the most disgusting and sour way, if you love, please love deeply. If you cast a monthly vote, please cast more. Please let us win. Please support. Please encourage me. Please let us win the championship. Damn it. Writing a chapter on canvassing votes is much more exhausting than digging a hole. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Those stones were of different shapes and corners. They were densely packed and filled the entire mountain and field, filling up the entire world. No matter how swift and fierce the sword momentum was, it was still difficult to travel in the face of the stones that filled the sky and earth. Back then, Mr. Kuzharan's sword was able to cut through the stones blocking the sky. Although Cheng Zicheng's swordsmanship was amazing, it was not at this level. In the blink of an eye, he felt that many stones were stuffed into his mouth. Then, there were many stones in his throat, chest, and abdomen. Those stones had a slightly numb taste, a slightly cool touch, and a stiff feeling. What was more painful was that those stones had sharp edges that constantly cut into his consciousness. Cheng Zicheng felt a tightness in his chest and his heart palpitated. With a clear whistle, he floated back and slashed out 128 times with the cyan steel sword in front of him. Finally, he managed to cut down all the rocks around him. He left the desolate world of rocks and breathed in fresh air again. Cheng Zicheng turned his head to look at the silent calligraphy addict, Mo Shanshan. His face was pale and he was shocked speechless. The sword in his hand had numerous scratches and was seriously damaged. It was as if it had collided with hundreds and thousands of hard stones at that moment. Earlier, when Cheng Zicheng rose with the sword and stabbed Ning Kei's back, Mo Shanshan struck at the same time. The calligraphy addict threw a ball of paper from her sleeves onto the ground in front of the futon. It was a piece of talisman paper that she had pinched into the shape of a small stone. That talisman paper was the talisman intent that she had learned from the pile of stones at the bottom of Daming Lake. It was with this understanding that she had entered the Knowing Destiny state this spring and become one of the youngest divine talisman masters in history. Because of this, Mo Shanshan named her talisman, Stone Array Tactics. In a battle, the biggest taboo was to be overcautious and indecisive. This was what Ning Kei had taught Mo Shanshan during their journey in the wilderness. Of course, he would not make such a mistake. That was why he did not stop attacking Master Wuxia even though he knew that Cheng Zicheng's sword was aimed at his back. He had a way to deal with the sword momentum of the sword Garrett powerhouse, such as the big black umbrella, which could at least buy him some time. However, the bronze bell in Master Wuxia's hand was still ringing, and Sang Sang was still vomiting blood. He had no way to deal with the bell. He did not have time, so he had to defeat Wuxia. 6 layers of the 9-layered Buddhist mantra aura on Master Wuxia's body had been cut by his padao. However, as the bronze bell rang, the Buddha's nature returned, and the 9-layered Buddhist mantra aura was restored in an instant. Ning Kei's expression was indifferent. He did not seem to care, nor was he disappointed. Before the blade of the padao in his right hand touched the ground, he lowered his waist and bent his knees. He clenched his left fist and punched Master Wuxia. In a battle between ordinary people, the fist was often the last resort, the most primitive, and possibly the strongest. However, in a battle between cultivators, whether it was the fist or the leg, as long as it was a part of the human body, it was bound to be the weakest, and even the most laughable. Ning Kei's fist was not laughable, because this was the first time he had revealed his devil's doctrine skills. More importantly, his fist contained an incomparably powerful Great Spirit. There was a loud bang. The 9-layered protective mantra aura on Master Wushu's body had been smashed through by Ning Kei's fist. Master Wushu looked at the fist that was getting closer and closer to him. His expression was one of shock. He held the bronze bell between his 2 fingers and charged forward. Ning Kei's fist slammed heavily on the bronze bell. The 1,000-mile Great Spirit inherited from youngest uncle Kuharan had finally met with the sacred Buddhist object left behind by Buddha. There was another loud bang. Master Wushu's face was pale, and 2 streaks of dark red blood flowed from the corners of his lips. The bronze bell between his fingers rang chaotically and swayed non-stop, like a small bell under the eaves in a storm that could fall at any time. But it did not fall. Ning Kei's fist momentum was about to end, but no one had expected that his continuous battle moves would be as fast as lightning. His right hand that was holding the padao had just touched the ground when he flipped it up again and slashed upwards diagonally. There was a soft swoosh. Master Wushu cried out in pain and fell to the ground in disappointment. His right arm had been detached from his body, and it flew towards the top of the Buddhist temple with blood. The arm that had been chopped off was still tightly gripping the bronze bell. Ning Kei's expression did not change. He reached out to grab Wushu's broken arm and prepared to retrieve the bronze bell. Since the bronze bell was Sangsang's nemesis, he had to hold it in his hand if he could not destroy it. However, just as his fingers touched the bronze bell, he suddenly felt an extremely majestic Buddha's nature. It curved from his fingers to his elbow and attacked his heart. An unbearable pain came from his fingers. The Buddha's nature was too terrifying, and Ning Kei groaned. He understood that the sacred object left behind by Buddha was indeed not something that Sang in him, who was protecting her, could touch. He let go of his fingers and let the bronze bell fall to his feet. Then, he pulled out a second iron arrow and turned to shoot at Cheng Zicheng, who had already glided back to the entrance of the temple. Cheng Zicheng had just used all his means to escape from Mo Shanshan's stone array tactics. He was looking at the calligraphy addict in shock and speechlessness. He did not expect to face an even more terrifying attack soon. No one expected that after Ning Kei had just taken a huge risk to defeat Master Wushu and cut off one of his arms, he would launch an attack on the powerhouses of the Sword Garret without stopping. In the entire temple, only Sang, who was behind him, and Shanshan, who was sitting in the corner, could think of this. This was Ning Kei's fighting style. Once a battle started, he would definitely knock down all opponents who could threaten him. He would only stop when he was sure that his opponent was dead or had no power to fight back. Cheng Zicheng was a powerful cultivator in the knowing destiny state and could pose a strong threat to Ning Quebec. Now that Mo Shanshan had attacked him, how could Ning Kei miss this opportunity? The dark iron arrow disappeared as soon as it left the bowstring. With a very faint white turbulence, it arrived in front of Cheng Zicheng in a flash. Just like Master Wushu, who could not resist the primordial 13 arrows that had exceeded the time limit, Cheng Zicheng could not do it either. But he was a powerhouse of the Sword Garret after all. He had already seen the power of Ning Kei's arrow when he shot at Master Wushu and was already on guard. When he saw Ning Kei turn around and draw his bow, he did not hesitate to respond in advance. With a sharp and clear whistle, the sword in Cheng Zicheng's hand, which had already been severely damaged, suddenly exploded. At the critical moment when his life was in grave danger, this powerhouse of the Sword Garret had forcefully dispersed his natal sword, which was as precious as his life, in exchange for a sword light that looked like a heavy curtain of rain. The iron arrow appeared in the heavy curtain of sword light. Countless extremely fine sounds of collision rang out. Countless pieces of the sword shot out and pierced into the beams, pillars, and windows of the temple, making clicking sounds. Cheng Zicheng flew backward and crashed heavily into a stone statue of the Venerable One. With a swish, the iron arrow landed on the green stone floor in front of him. No one knew how deep the iron arrow had gone into the ground, but it had long disappeared, leaving only a black hole. Because of the intense friction between the arrow and the green stone, wisps of green smoke rose from the edge of the hole. Looking at the hole in front of him, Cheng Zicheng's face finally showed a look of fear and he spat out a mouthful of blood. I went to bed early last night, but I did not expect to sleep from 10 o'clock at night until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I slept for a record 19 hours. I slept until my whole body was sore and groggy. I really made up for all the things that I did not say a few days ago. Some of the small and lazy preparation under the leather robe began to rise. When I turned on the computer to look at the monthly votes list, I was immediately energized. There are 3 chapters today. If you like it, please continue to vote. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for it. Your support is my biggest motivation. You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.